are you really? Think about it. Your answer to that question is shaping your destiny. It's going to determine how you're going to respond to innumerable situations. Hi, this is Tony Robbins. Welcome to another edition of Power Talk. As we talked about last month, our beliefs definitely control our behavior. So the beliefs you have about one person, like a friend of yours, will determine how you interact with that person. The beliefs you have about a food will determine whether you eat that food. That's pretty basic. But the beliefs you have about people in general are global beliefs, and that'll affect all kinds of relationships. And the beliefs you have about yourself are the most potent beliefs of all. Not only the beliefs you have about what you're capable of, but the beliefs you have about who you are. Because you and I need to remember, it's not our capabilities that determine our behaviors. Our capabilities are constant. What we do is based on identity. I remember an interesting story that was told to me years ago that represents this idea of identity. It's the story of the frog and the scorpion. It seems one day a scorpion wanted to make his way across a river, and he saw a frog and thought, what a great way. So he called out to the frog. He said, Mr. Frog, he said, I'm a scorpion, and I need to get across to my family on the other side. He said, would you be willing to let me ride on your back across to the other side? It's the only way I can get across. The frog looked at him and said, well, I don't think so. He said, how come? The frog said, well, you're a scorpion. Scorpions sting frogs. Well, I'd get halfway across with you out there, and you'd sting me, and I'd die. And the scorpion looked at him and said, oh, Mr. Frog. He said, you're not thinking with your little frog brain. He said, if I stung you, he said, I'd kill you, but I'd drown too. He said, I wouldn't do that. I'd be killing myself. And the frog seemed a little confused by this and said, okay. He let the scorpion jump on his back. He started to swim across the river, and about halfway across, sure enough, the scorpion stings the frog. He can't even believe it. He looks at him, he's going down for the third time, and he turns to the scorpion, he says, I can't believe you did this. Why'd you do this? I'm dying, but you're going to die too. Why? And the scorpion said, because I'm a scorpion, and that's what scorpions do. They sting frogs. What does this story mean? It represents one of the most potent forces in the human personality, and that is this. One of our strongest needs within our personality is to make certain that our behavior is consistent with our identity, even if the identity we hold for ourselves is negative. What do I mean? Well, there's a very big difference between feeling stupid, doing something stupid, or knowing you are stupid. Now, that may sound like semantics, but it makes a huge difference in how you live your life. We all feel stupid at times. We all do stupid things at times. But if you make the jump from feeling or doing something stupid in the moment to believing you are stupid, that belief about who you are will color every single behavior you're involved with for the rest of your life. It defines you and it limits you. You see, the beliefs we have about who we are, our identity, create the boundaries within which we live our lives. And it isn't limited to something like whether or not we think we're smart or stupid. You say, well, I would never say I'm stupid. I'm smarter than that. Well, maybe you put it in the area of that I'm a procrastinator. See, it's different to have been a person who's procrastinated at times or to procrastinate in the moment than to know you're a procrastinator. Once you decide that's who you are, that behavior will be consistent. Just because you need to be consistent with your own identity. It works in every context you can imagine. It's different to know that you've got 10 extra pounds on your body. That's different than knowing you're a fat person or that you're a compulsive personality. You got to be very careful of the labels that you create for yourself or you allow others to give you because they begin to define your experience. They begin to change what you notice about yourself, what you're willing to try, what you're not willing to try. They define the way you live. I can tell you, I've met with people over the years who tried everything to make a change and had been even successful in changing a behavior, like let's say stop smoking or stop using drugs or something, but it was usually short term and it didn't last. Why didn't it last for them previously? And now I worked with them and we got something that now 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, it still seems to be working. In fact, there's not even a struggle. They're not working not to smoke. They're not working not to take the drugs. Why? What do we do different this time? Well, in the past, they tried just to change their behavior, but they didn't change their identity. They didn't change their beliefs about who they were as a person. See, I can show you how to get off drugs and not use drugs, but if you believe you're a drug addict and then you don't use drugs for 6 months, I guarantee you it's going to be a struggle because you're fighting who you are the whole time. And eventually there's a good chance you'll go back, or for the rest of your life, you'll have to go to sessions where you try to remind yourself that you can't use drugs. You know, there are plenty of people who've been addicted to drugs for years, hard stuff, and one day they've quit and never touched it again. How did they do that? Wouldn't it drive you crazy till you figured out someone made a change like that? A change from Saul to Paul, where one day what you loved you now hate, and what you once hated you now love. That's an identity change. That's powerful. That happens when you no longer see yourself as a drug addict. See, you can't be a drug addict and expect your behavior to be easy to change. It's much harder to change who you are in most people's perception than to change a behavior. See, that's the shift. You have to become the kind of person who would never even consider drugs in a million years. Think about it. Isn't there something in your life that you would never do? I mean, never. I know one for me is I would never murder another person. I mean, there's not even a question in my mind about that. So the thing to think about is this. If you would never murder someone, in your case also, why wouldn't you do it? So it's unthinkable. Why is it unthinkable? Because I would just never do that. Why would you never do that? Because it's not part of your identity. It's not part of your beliefs about who you are. See, your beliefs about who you are define what you will and will not do. See, it goes way beyond what you're capable of. Are you capable of murder? Some people say, well, maybe I'm capable, but I would never do it. There's a big difference between capability and how you live. And closing that gap requires an understanding of identity, an understanding of how to stop pursuing the kind of person you want to be, and in a moment, suddenly being that person right now and from this day forward. That is the potency of identity, and it's accomplished in many ways. It can happen by a defining moment. You know, most people think of Mother Teresa, and they think of an incredible woman, as we should. Her identity to most of the world is an incredible giver. And she's always been a giver of sorts, but she hasn't always been a giver at the level she is now. Did you know that up to the age of 50, for example, she did not do anything really to help the poor? She lived in India, and she taught children in a school. And you know what they were? They were the most privileged children in India. Most of them were English. She could see the ghetto out from where she was, and she never entered it. Till one day when she was walking home, a man who was struggling through the ghetto stumbled forward towards her and fell into her arms. She realized he was dying. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't just leave him there, so she took him to a hospital. And sure enough, he was of a lower caste, and so as a result, they wouldn't take care of him. They kept putting him further back in the line. She said he's going to die, but no one would help her, so she went to another hospital, and then a third. And finally, she took him home, and there he ended up dying in her arms. Her life was changed forever. That was a defining moment for Mother Teresa. She took a train ride out of the city, and when she came back, she was a different woman, and she had a different mission, a different focus. No longer could she stand by and watch those who were desperate live in that way. She said, although they may die, they will die with love and they will die with dignity. I will be there for these people. And that word, that statement, that decision, that identity has now touched lives around the world. You don't have to be Mother Teresa to have a defining moment. I'm sure you may have had one or many. By the way, you may be asking, well, Tony, why do people behave consistent with an identity that makes no sense? Because in our culture, consistency is constantly rewarded, and change is often met with pain. I don't just mean pain within yourself, I mean pain from society. Think about it. In our culture, what do we call someone who says one thing and later on they do something different? We call them inconsistent, a liar, somebody you can't trust, somebody who's wishy-washy. I mean, we could go on and on with the labels. Nobody wants those. We link pain to creating change, especially at the level of who you are. Hey, how come you didn't tell me you're that kind of person? When you might say, well, I've been changing. Oh, yeah, sure you have. But on the other side, what do we call somebody who stays consistent? Somebody says that they're a certain way and they behave that way over and over again. Sure enough, that person is trustworthy. That person is somebody's honest. That's somebody you can count on. That person is stable. So what this does is it tends to lock us into whatever identity we used to have. And that becomes a big limitation. Either that limit or the limit that comes from being successful. See, when we become successful, oftentimes we become superstitious. We don't want to lose what we've got. After all, we worked so hard to be in this position. Somebody comes by and says, hey, you could change that. You could make it better. They go, wait a second. You don't understand. This is what's made me successful, being this way. Well, there's a great phrase that I kind of paraphrase from Einstein. It's not exactly what he said, but if he thought of it, I'm sure he would have said it. It kind of goes like this. And that is, I've been using this on myself, so I don't know who actually said it, but it came from my reading of Einstein. And that is that really, in essence, the level of thinking that's gotten us to where we are is not what's going to get us to where we want to go. See, to get to where we want to be, we got to take on a new level of thinking. We got to know that what we've done up until now has been great. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fantastic. But to get to the next level, we've got to look at life in a new way. And one of those new looks is we got to perceive ourselves in a different way. Not just our capability, but who we are right now, not someday, today. That shift begins the minute you begin to consciously define yourself instead of letting the environment do it for you. Because think about it. How do most of us define ourselves? Where do we come up with our identity anyway? Well, it comes from a variety of environments, but maybe the best way to answer the question is ask a different one. How do you define the people around you? How do you know if they're a friend, if they're a good person or not? The way we define other people, the way we discover their identity is we watch them. We listen to them. We judge people's identity usually by their behavior. Isn't that true? I mean, think about it. Somebody treats you real harshly several times each time you're around them. Pretty soon you go, I know that person. That person's a jerk. You know what the challenge is? Once you decide that they're a jerk, and if that becomes a belief, or worse, if that becomes a conviction where you know they're a jerk, nothing's going to change your opinion about it. Then even if they're a really nice person later on, they were just having a horrible day. Maybe they were being a jerk that day, but that's not who they are. Once you define them that way, guess what? Nothing they can do can change it. So you got to know that sometimes we do the same thing to ourselves. That's the danger. Sometimes we do something terrible, and then we say, gosh, I'm a terrible person. Or we do something stupid, and we go, I'm a stupid person. Sometimes we get caught in a pattern of behavior that's undisciplined. But you know what? If we start saying, look, I'm an undisciplined person, now it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If now all of a sudden you start defining yourself as an undisciplined person, if that becomes your belief as to who you are, not that you're capable of being undisciplined, everyone's capable of that, not that you've been that way at times, but that's who you are. Once you put that label upon yourself, now your future behavior and therefore the results of your life are going to be colored by it. So you got to be careful. I'll give you an example of how this has been used to manipulate people in a very negative way. During the Korean War, our American POWs collaborated with the enemy more times than any time in our history. Now, how come? Because the Chinese communists understood the power of identity. They understood that you can only get a person to do something by force so long. But if you can change their perceptions, if you can change their philosophy, if you can change the way they think, if you can change their belief about who they are, you can change their behavior permanently. And that was their goal. See, the American fighting man knew who he was. He had an identity. And he also knew if somebody tries to torture you, you know all you give them is name, rank, and serial number. And that's worked for gosh only knows how many years. But the Chinese communists used what they called the leniency policy. They decided that what they wanted to do was try a different approach. They would bring the POW in and sit him down and say, listen, you don't have to be afraid of us. You know, we're only your enemy because your government's attacking us. We're just caring people. We're just defending ourselves. Listen, we don't want to hurt you. Here, have a cigarette. And they'd sit and talk with the gentleman. And this American POW would be very suspicious. But after 4 or 5 or 6 hours of talking and having a nice conversation, he'd begin to get a little tired and a little exhausted, a little worn down, but these people were so cordial. They'd say, look, your government doesn't care about you. Don't you understand the kind of unrest that's happening in your nation right now? They said, we care about our people. They said, let me ask you a question. What's really not perfect about America? Are you going to try and tell us it's perfect? And the American POW would usually respond, well, of course, America's not perfect. That's all they needed. Their whole goal was to break into the shell of identity and get you to make some very small commitments and then enlarge them. What do I mean? Well, they'd say, well, how is America not perfect? The person will say, well, you know, I don't know, we have unemployment, I guess. You know, have some people out of work. They say, well, let me ask you a question. In communism, do we have people unemployed? POW say, well, I don't know. They said, no, we don't. Everyone is employed in a communist nation. They said, do me a favor, just write this down, just to be fair. Write down, America's not perfect. The guy would say, wait a second, you want me to make a comment? I don't want to write that down. He said, well, is it true? You just said it. It's true, isn't it? And POW said, well, yeah, and he'd write down, well, America's not perfect. And they'd write down how America's not perfect. Write down that communism, we have people who are employed. And sure enough, out of exhaustion and out of compliance, without being forced to, the American POW would have a document now in front of him that later on he would even sign that would basically describe why democracy was terrible and communism was great. Now, he's got to be able to explain to himself why he did this. Remember, we judge who we are by our own behaviors. So sure enough, he looks at his behavior and says, I wasn't forced, I wasn't coerced. How come I put this down? Well, because it's true. Then if that wasn't bad enough, he would go back to his cell, and the other cellmates would look at him and say, what happened? You've been gone for 18 hours, 12 hours. You don't look like you're marked up. What's the deal? He said, well, they just asked me some questions. And sure enough, in a few minutes later, over the loudspeaker, the Chinese communists would read this essay signed by him. And they'd say, did you write that? And he would, well, say, yeah. And they'd say, well, how could you do that? Did they beat you? Did they torture you? What'd they do? And he said, well, Nothing. Well, how could you do this? Well, the American POW will finally, at that moment, he'd have to be able to justify. So he'd say, well, because it's true. And at that moment, the Chinese communists had accomplished what they wanted. His identity began to change. Because two things happened. He began to defend a whole nother view. He began to believe that this was an accurate representation of his deepest feelings. He was simply judging a set of small actions that were orchestrated, directed without his awareness. But worse, now others saw him as a collaborator, and they would begin to isolate him, sometimes even physically break out and fight or beat him. Now who's the enemy? His fellow POWs. And as a result, he would collaborate secretly with the enemy on a larger scale again than any time in our history. This example should show you the power of identity. I can tell you a more modern example is a group of people that social psychologists also manipulated for the purpose of a study. They brought these people in and got them to see themselves as the kind of people that contribute in a variety of areas in their life. They pointed out to them the places that they'd given help to other people. And they got them to do very small actions to support people in the hospital. Gradually, their identity changed to one of a contributor to those in need in the hospital. These people were then asked to donate bone marrow, one of the single most painful operations you can go through, for a total stranger. And the pressure, not just social pressure, but the pressure we feel inside to remain consistent with our own view of ourselves, caused these people to comply. Fortunately, in the project, they didn't make them, but they got all the way to the point where they'd be actually giving their bone marrow before they were told they didn't have to. This is the power of identity. We will behave consistent with our identity, even if our identity is negative. So we must be very careful about what we buy into. I mean, the classic example is with our children. The Pygmalion effect, I'm sure you've heard of it. What it is research study that's been done over the years where they take teachers and they tell them that a particular student is absolutely outstanding, that they're a gifted child, for example, and that they'll need to be challenged a lot, though, because otherwise they'll just slough off. You know what invariably happens? The child becomes the leader of the class. Or if it's a group of children that they bring to the teacher, those students begin to excel higher than almost anyone else in the class, all because of expectation. What's really fascinating is in some of these studies, the children previously had been problem kids who had difficulty in learning. See, this Pygmalion effect works in our lives as well. I can tell you in my own life, the Pygmalion effect certainly has shaped a part of who I am. I can remember in the 3rd grade, I was not a good student. I was not particularly smart. I hated mathematics. But at the school I went to, they were very strict. And in the 3rd grade, in the first part of the year, I think the thing we were studying at that time was multiplication tables. And we had to have them all memorized. And our teacher drilled us like crazy. Well, halfway through the 3rd grade, I got transferred to another school. And when I went to that school, they had just started multiplication tables. I was already done. I knew them all. I'd memorized them all. And sure enough, when the teacher had a question, boom, I had the answer. When we went to go take a test, instead of taking 30 minutes to take the test, I was done in 5 minutes. I just whipped it all out, handed it to her. And the teacher looked at me and said, wow, you're outstanding. And I believed her. You know, all of a sudden I had all this free time. She said, what do you want to do? I said, no, I don't know. She said, well, why don't you go to the library and study something you're interested in? So I went over there and I got interested in what makes light work. How does light happen? I read these books on light, and she asked me to come and describe to her what I learned, and I told her, and she got fascinated. At least I thought she was fascinated, and reinforced me even more. And then I started writing reports on Mars and the planets and the solar system and gravity. And within a couple of years of being this way, I didn't want to lose the edge. I was now the student in class that was always ahead. I was always the leader. By the time I was in the 5th grade, I'd take my entire science book, that the whole school year we'd only go through half of it, and during the weekends I'd read it all, I'd take all the tests, and the teacher would say, well, what do you want to do for the free period? I became that person who was always learning, always growing, always fascinated. And pretty soon normal school seemed boring to me. And they all said, boy, look at how quickly he excels. So they gave me a test. And they said, sure enough, he's a mentally gifted minor. My goodness, I know how to label. This is pretty exciting. I'm gifted. What do you think that would do to you to have somebody tell you you're gifted? If you didn't get that gift earlier, why don't you give that gift to yourself right now? We're all gifted. All that is a darn label. I did well in a particular area because I got reinforced. See, the same thing happens on the opposite side, though. So many children do poorly on something because they have a different strategy, or because they don't understand something yet, or it hasn't been communicated in their style, and then we assume they're learning disabled. They live with that label. And you know what? That label doesn't just affect them in their ability to learn. It affects their self-image. It affects the way they look at their lives. And all of us have wounds in this area. I just cleaned mine up because I got sick of it, because I realized it's all garbage, that I get to determine who I am. The day I decided that was the day my life changed. And that's the day I want this to be for you. You know this already. You know it consciously. But you got to remember the power of a belief. We talked about it last month. Beliefs are so powerful, they can change your body chemistry. Remember last month we talked about these people who believe they change personalities, split personalities, and the color of their eyes change? That's the power of a belief, that sense of absolute certainty. You've got to tap into those beliefs that affect you most, and those are the beliefs you have about who you are today, not who you're going to be, who you are right now. So let me ask you that question again. Who are you? I mean, who are you really? There's so many ways you could define yourself, but how do you? Because the definition you have of yourself is creating the boundaries, again, that you're living your life within. See, what do you have a conviction about when you describe yourself? Who do you feel certain you are? Not what other people have said about you, not what people expect from you. In your gut, who are you? See, are you a leader or are you a follower? Are you a person who makes a difference or are you a victim? Are you someone who's constantly trying to figure out how to grow? Or are you somebody who is constantly looking for an excuse? Are you merely a collection of habit patterns? Or are you something deeper, something richer? Are you merely your past, or are you who you're defining now? I would suggest to you that right now is a moment you could begin to ask this question and really begin to give the answer. Instead of saying, this is an esoteric tape, what the heck is he talking about here? Who am I? What is this stuff? I want some tools, Mr. Robbins. Maybe you could really stop for a second and really consider the answer. Who are you? See, when I ask the question of people, I usually get one of three responses. Either a blank stare, which is somebody who goes into trance, or I get the Popeye response. I am what I am, But there are a few people who actually stop and they think about, who am I? How would I define myself? Because, see, we all want to be able to define ourselves. We want to show how we're different, how we're unique. Otherwise, you're no different than the person who's sitting next to you. How do you have a sense of identity? Identity is nothing but definition. And with identity come parameters of who you are mentally, emotionally, physically. How do you describe who you are to yourself? And what I'm really asking you to do is to ask a question. Just like Gorbachev did, I'm asking you to have some glasnost with yourself. Be open with yourself to ask the question anew. Who are you really? The way you're defining yourself is controlling how you're responding to this tape. It'll control your relationships. It'll control your occupation. It controls the way you think, the way you feel, and what you do. Now, how can you define yourself? Let me help you out with this so it doesn't just go off into the distance here. And if you're driving, while you're asking this question, notice what's going on around you as well. Don't go into a deep trance on me here. So how can you define yourself? There's so many ways. Or again, that's what identity is. To give you a clear definition, it's how you define yourself to yourself. How do you know you're different than your brother or your sister or your neighbor? What makes you different? What makes you the person that you can discern as being unique? Those elements that you use to describe yourself with conviction are the ones I call identity. So, for example, some people, when they describe their identity, describe themselves by their emotions. That's basically who they think they are. So a person will say, well, I'm a loving person. That's who I am. Or if I say, who are you? They might say, well, I'm a peaceful person, or I'm an intense person. Some people don't use their emotions at all to describe their identity. Some people choose roles. Well, I'm just a mom. And I say, what? Just a mom? A mom is so many things. What are you, crazy? Come on here. A mom has got to be everything. She's the best friend. She's the teacher. She's a student. She's fun. She's outrageous. She's a stimulator. She's an entertainer. I mean, she's everything. You can't just be a mom. You better expand your identity. But see, a lot of people go, well, I'm just a mom. I'm just a dad. Expand that view. But notice, how else do you define yourself? Start with how you already define yourself. Maybe you do it by your job. Some people say, well, I'm a doctor, or I'm a priest, or I'm a salesman, or I'm a lawyer. That's one of the challenges. See, they don't say, I practice law. They say, I am a lawyer. So they go home at night and they cross-examine their spouse and wonder why they got problems. We got to get beyond that process. You got to know that you're more than what you do. But again, just start with what you have. I keep jumping to the next step. I want to expand you, but let's figure out how you already see yourself. So you need to start with that so you're aware of where you are. What else could you use? Well, you could use your roles. You could use your identity as emotions. You could do your occupation. What would be another category? Oh, metaphors. Some people use things like, I'm king of the hill, or I'm at the bottom of the rock pile. Those metaphors, as we've already described in the previous Power Talk, really shape a lot of how you think and how you feel and what's possible for you. What else could you use? Well, some people describe themselves based upon the feedback they've had in their past. Something like, I'm worthless, or I'm special, or maybe by their spiritual beliefs. I'm Jewish. Or their looks. I'm beautiful, I'm ugly, I'm old. Or maybe with their accomplishments. I'm the 1960s Spring Valley High homecoming queen, and it's 1991. Hello. Some people have lost track of who they really are. You're not your past. Some people define it by what they're not. Oftentimes I ask people, who are you? And they respond by saying, well, I'm not this, I'm not my father, I'm not my brother, I'm not like this person, I'm not like that. You know what? Part of how you define who you are that's different than other people's, what you're not, but don't make your whole identity based on what you're not, or otherwise you're pretty limited in what you are. Some people describe themselves based on their past, their failures, for example. Other people do it based upon their future. How are you defining yourself? Who are you? What's the essence of your life? I keep asking you this question because I want you to keep asking it of yourself. Keep refining the answer. And in a moment, I want you to pull over if you're in your car, or I want you to stop what you're doing, and I want you to stop this tape, and I want you to write who you are. Describe yourself to yourself so that once and for all, you can get an idea of what's going on unconsciously. Because here's the thing I don't think I've made clear. The biggest challenge with identity is most of us are not conscious about what our beliefs are about who we are. See, that's their power to control us. They're unconscious. But if we get really conscious about our beliefs and we stare at them and take a real good look, we'll immediately start seeing what the limitations are in our beliefs. And we'll also see some of the benefits, because the truth of the matter is, you probably have a lot of great beliefs about who you are as well. So right now, I want you to stop this tape, no more conversation, take out your journal or a piece of paper and just write down the question that philosophers have asked for thousands of years. Who am I? And describe in detail who you are. And when you're done with that, take at least 5 minutes, minimum of 5, and then come back here and let's talk some more. Stop the tape now. Welcome back. Now, I assume I'm welcoming you back, right? You really did turn this tape off, and you really did do the exercise, didn't you? If not, go do it. Because if you didn't do that, why didn't you? Because you're busy? You're too busy? You said, Tony, I'm really busy. I got a lot to do. I don't have time to think about my identity. Give me a break. And more scary than that, do you do this in a lot of areas of your life? Do you unconsciously identify yourself as a person who listens to things and then doesn't act upon them? I doubt it, because I think if you're the kind of person who listens to this kind of tape and you're listening every single month, you obviously are committed to make your life better. So now that you know who you are, who do you really want to be? See, however you limited yourself in the past, or whatever, even if you think your identity is really strong, in order to achieve all that you want, who would you have to become? Think about it. Would you have to be more gregarious, more outrageous, more fun, more passionate, more disciplined? Whatever you have to be, you need to become it now, not someday. You don't need to make it a goal. You need to fuse with that identity. You need to start thinking, if I was this person, how would I breathe? How would I walk? How would I talk? How would I treat people? What would I do when I woke up in the morning? How would I speak to myself? How would I think about life? And then you need to think about this and literally fuse with it. Imagine stepping into the body of this person and becoming this person, and then immediately go out and act this way. I remember years ago, I used to tell people, listen, if you want to change your life, conduct your life as if you were a public figure. I said, think about how public figures have to be, how they have to live, how they have to treat people, what they have to do. And I said, if you do that long enough, the quality of your life will literally transform. Well, you know what? I became that person. I became a public figure, and I wasn't one. But now I am. It's an amazing experience. And what's great about it is I don't have to behave any different than I have for years. The way you hear me now is the way I am. This is who I am. I don't have to fake it or act like it. This is who Tony Robbins is. So now when people see me in an airport, I don't have to be constantly monitoring myself and saying, well, am I being appropriate or am I going to be misinterpreted? I'm just being who I am. That identity is real for me. And you might want to take that advice again. You might want to think about how would you conduct your life if you were a public figure? How would you be if you were already living your dream? See, if you'll start behaving, thinking, feeling, and knowing you're the person you've been pursuing, I can promise you many of the goals that are way out there, you'll start to experience them as a reality right now, or whatever's necessary to make them real will show up. That's the power of identity. I can tell you that what shaped my life is I got a vision of who I wanted to be, and I defined who I was by my future. I got this clear vision of the kind of person I wanted to be, and I brought it forward and stepped into the picture and started living it, even though the environment wasn't consistent with it. And I got a conviction that this is who I am, regardless of what the world thinks. I know this is who I am, regardless of what I was earning or what people said, good or bad. Nothing could change my character. That was constant. That reputation may come or go based upon what people would think, but my character was the one thing I could count on. And as long as I knew who I was, that my outside world would eventually reflect what I knew was true inside. That was the day my life changed.
This program is continued on the opposite side.
The day that you define yourself in higher terms and live by those standards and know that's who you are is the day that your world begins to change. So take another moment right now and once again stop the tape and write down an expanded view of who you are. Who are you really? Who are you at your essence? And don't just write down the stuff that you have an opinion about. Write down the things you have a conviction about. Take a moment right now. Take 5 minutes again. Pull over if necessary. This is fairly important. And write down the answer. Right now, if you're still listening, right now, pull over and do it. Or sit down and do it. Turn the tape off. That's it. Good. So now that you've got this expanded view of yourself, you did the assignment, right? I'm assuming that. I don't have to have another talk with you, do I? I'm not going to do my full Sam Kinison impression right now because my voice won't take it. But I'm sure you did the exercise, didn't you? Good. Let's continue. The bottom line is, now that you have this expanded view of yourself, you got a bigger view of who you are, how do you make it more real? You got to fuse with it. Now, one of the ways to do this is to go out and actually think about what would this person do? What are some of the actions this person would take, and go take those. References are those experiences in our life, the reference experiences of doing certain things or hearing certain things or just experiencing certain things, and they help us to back up our beliefs, get certainty behind them. For example, if you believe that you are an intelligent person, it's because you had an idea called I'm an intelligent person, and at one point you didn't believe it. It was just an idea. It was like a tabletop with no legs. But then you took some tests successfully. People told you were intelligent. You noticed you could figure some challenges out, and each one of these became a leg underneath your tabletop. Till now the table is solid. It'll stand there. It's a solid belief. You feel certain about it. Well, that's the same way you can help yourself to change your identity. Get some references. Go out and do some of the things that a person like this would do. Now, don't limit yourself to this technique, because you can change your identity right now by making a decision. In fact, I know a good friend of mine who went out. Her name is Deborah. She's a brilliant lady. She's an adventurous, outrageous, passionate woman that so many of my friends like. And she works in our franchise operation at Robbins Research. And what's interesting about Deborah, I've known her through the years, is I've watched her evolve and become stronger. But she didn't realize how much she'd grown within herself as much as other people did, looking at her from the outside. And when I talked to her about identity one day, it became a really powerful conversation, because she said, I've always considered myself to be a wimp. I mean, for years, I've seen myself as a wimp. And, I know I'm capable of doing incredible things, but I'm still a wimp. I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, I've done all these crazy things. I've skydived and, I've even walked on the fire and stuff. And I know I did those things. And when I told my friends, they said, man, you're such an adventurous person. I thought, what are you, crazy? I was a wimp. I was scared. I'm a wimp who skydived. And I thought, isn't that amazing? When we have a conviction about who we are, sure enough, nothing is going to, even new experiences sometimes don't change us. We've got to be willing to see ourselves differently and then get the reference experiences. Otherwise, we could have experience to back up the idea that we're smart but not notice it. We don't notice we do well on tests. We only notice the ones we don't do well on, and that reinforces the limiting belief. So that day she said, I'm going to go skydiving. I have decided that I really am an adventurous person, and that is how you make the change. Sooner or later, no matter what experiences you have to make a decision, a real decision within yourself, where you cut off any possibility of being anyone other than the person you've defined. She said, I got on the plane, I looked around and saw these other people that were going up in the plane, and you know how they are when the people are brand new, going to go skydiving, and they're trying to look like they're real confident, but they're really scared to death inside, and they have those perma-grins on their face. And I said, yes, I've seen it. She said, I looked at those people and said, that's how I used to be. And by the way, this is a great secret for you in changing your identity. If you find yourself utilizing an old style of communication or an old behavior that doesn't really represent you well, look at that behavior and think to yourself, that's how I used to be. Remind your brain that that's not who you are anymore. It'll reinforce your new identity and strengthen a new set of behaviors. The bottom line is, she said that she got up there and she said, that's how I used to be. Who I am now is an adventurous, passionate woman. I'm here to love this experience. And she said she jumped out of that airplane and had the best time that she's ever had. She landed on the ground. She was in ecstasy. And she said she'd never felt that way. She was always exhausted by the trip and trying to feel good about it. This is the power of changing identity, and you can make it happen in a moment, the moment you decide. Now, for some people to decide, by the way, they need to go through a ritual. Throughout human history, people have used rituals to change their identity, not only within themselves, but the way other people see them. Because the way other people see you and the things they expect from you tend to influence your behavior if you're not clear yourself who you are. You got to be careful. You got to have such a conviction about who you are that nobody can sway you. You know who you are inside, regardless of whether you're getting the results you want or not in the short term. But if you want to make a difference, look at what would be a good ritual. Again, if you look at the African culture, for example, I remember years ago when I saw the movie Roots and seeing Kunta Kinte, who was a friend of mine, LeVar Burton, who played that role so powerfully. But Kunta Kinte was part of a village, and how did a boy know he was a man? There was a specific ritual, so in one day, he transformed. The boys in the village kept talking about, they knew the day was coming. They heard stories that on the day you become a man, somebody came and put a hood over your head and they took you to this special place and took you through this ritual. And that's exactly what happened. And the rituals were varied. And one of them I will not describe, but I can only tell you it was somewhat painful, and it was a way for them to have physical evidence he was a man. He came back walking different, literally, and he was wearing a special outfit. And sure enough, when he came back, the whole village now, because he was wearing that outfit and had been through the ritual, knew he was now a man and began to treat him differently. Our environment reinforces or takes away from identity. That's why we've got to decide the identity we want within ourselves. Today, how do people know if they're a man or a woman? Well, I guess the ritual in our culture is drinking. In Judaism, how does a boy know he's a man? He has a bar mitzvah. The girls have their version of that process. So we've missed a lot of that in our culture. But we found ways to replace it. They're just not quite as clear. And maybe we found ways that are not real resourceful. Going and getting wasted on your 21st birthday may not be the most powerful way of being able to identify yourself as a person who's free to do what they choose. Maybe there's a better way. But regardless, think of what might be a nice ritual for you. Maybe it's something crazy. Maybe, for example, you have excess weight. You used to think of yourself as a fat person. As long as you believe you're a fat person, not just somebody who has excess weight, if that becomes your identity, that you're a fat person, sure enough, you're going to find it very difficult to change. In fact, you can do all the right things, but you'll return to that identity. You'll start overeating again or do whatever's necessary to get consistent with your belief for who you are. So maybe what you need to do is go through a ritual, one that's stronger than all the diets you've been on. Maybe you need to figure something out unique that'll really jar you. Like one day you burn all your clothes except one outfit. And then you go out and you buy all new clothes at a size that's reasonable for you to be able to reach. And you know you got to keep wearing that outfit till you get there. I'm only speaking partially with tongue-in-cheek. I mean, we need to get more outrageous in the way we approach things. The reason I've used the firewalk for years is because people tend to transform a lot of their beliefs about who they are. It's not the firewalk has any power. Anybody could walk on fire. You could do it tomorrow. And I tell people that when I first get to the firewalk, I said, you could do it right now. All that's stopping is your limiting beliefs and having a little bit of strategy. But you know what happens? Intellectually, they know they're capable. Everybody knows they're capable. But it's when you do something, that's when you know you've changed. And what happens is they get on the other side of this fire and their brain says, my gosh, if I can get myself to do this and it's this easy, what else did I used to think was so difficult or impossible that now it's probably just as easy? It begins to change their picture of who they are. I used references like this in all kinds of areas. I did it with skydiving. I did it with firewalking. I did it with karate when I learned how to break through wood in less than an hour. When I worked with the Army, all kinds of different events and situations where I opened up my heart and I was vulnerable and I put myself on the line, and all of a sudden people were even more loving to me, and I learned, hey, vulnerability is power. All of those references have had an impact on who I perceive myself as being now. And the same is true of you. But what you've got to do is consciously decide what references should you seek out. What references would change your identity if you really took part of them and decided that they meant you had made a major change in who you'd become. I know, for example, my son Tyler, who had been a mechanic for many years, and in that environment, he found, as a generalization, that a lot of guys in that environment had been influenced by cultural values, that the way to get out of pain was to go drink. And so sure enough, he found himself doing some of the same things. The same values were there, the same kind of identity, the same kind of lifestyle. Well, his identity changed. One day he began to look around and say, man, I am better than this. I'm more than this. And we began to find a new environment where now his friends are. He's now a commercial helicopter pilot today. And boy, those guys don't go drink. You can't go drink. You don't go do that. You find joy and passion in being more unique and doing something that very few people on earth have the capability of doing, much less the privilege. And I've seen his whole identity change. I'll never forget a day not long ago when we went to Fiji and we were getting off the plane and we're filling out those yellow slips, and you have to fill out the little section where it says, what's your occupation? And he wrote down commercial pilot. He looked at it and he smiled real big and he said, wow, I like that. And I could see that little gleam in his eye. In that moment, he really got it even more. That's who he is now. He's more than what he thought of himself as being before. I'm so proud of him. Or during the same trip, watching the evolution of identity of my youngest son, Jarek. I mean, we first got there, and he's 7 years old, and everybody's going to go out and go snorkeling, off the reefs. Well, he wasn't terribly enthusiastic about the idea, let's just put it that way. And I took him out there, and he got to the edge and looked down and said, no, I don't think I want to do this. And I said, okay, no problem. I said, why don't we just do this one little thing? And I used the same technique as the Chinese. I said, let's just do this one little thing over here. And I took him out off the sand in this little tiny area where there was like this little swimming hole and a lot of fish. And sure enough, he got addicted to that. And gradually we went a little further. And the next thing you know, he was out on the boat and jumping out in the middle of the ocean, swimming around these huge fish. And the next night, we had a night dive. Now, there are a lot of people that are divers who've been diving for 10, 15 years, and they've never done a night dive. Well, next thing I know, Jarek wants to come out on a night dive with us. So he's out there snorkeling with me, hand in hand, going out there into the water. All of a sudden, he doesn't want me. He's swimming with somebody else, having an incredible time, being safe, being intelligent, but his whole identity, within a week, it changed. You could see him. He walked different. He laughed different. He was more outgoing. He started to see himself as an adventurer, as the kind of person that could go and make things happen, person who could immerse themselves. And his identity changed literally that quick. See, I know I've gone on and on in this tape. I'm getting across, hopefully, one singular, potent message. And that is this: your life is defined by your beliefs, your convictions of who you are. That is the essence of what's controlling you. And if you ever try to change a behavior and it didn't last, it's because you changed the behavior for the moment, but you didn't change the controlling force. Your perception of who you are, that is what's got to shift. And maybe for you it's subtle, and maybe for you it's huge. I don't know. But I can tell you this, the first step is what I said earlier. Become aware of the unconscious beliefs you have about who you are. And again, those beliefs are sometimes reflected in your behavior, sometimes not, so that's not the way to define it. Just sit down and answer the question, who am I? It's a question that philosophers have asked for thousands of years, and it's one you deserve to ask yourself, and give it enough time. Spend at least 10 minutes answering the question who you are. I know you're busy, okay, but take the time to ask the question, and don't just give the Popeye response, I am what I am. Stop and think and give some meaningful answers of the first things that come out of your gut. And even if you don't like them, like, if you say something like, well, I'm inconsistent, or I'm a person that never follows through, write those things down. It's okay. The first step is to notice what you believe. And you know what? You probably have references to back up those beliefs. Remember, you can find references to back up the idea that anybody is a good person or anybody's a bad person. If you look for something, you'll find a reference to back it up. If you want to back up the idea that people are basically rotten and they'll rip you off, anybody has references to back it up if they want to. If you want to back up the idea that people are good people and they care, everyone's got references to back that up if they look deeply enough. So the fact that you believe something in the past does not mean it was true. Just find out first what you've been believing about yourself. Write it down. Then step 2, immediately begin to question those limiting beliefs. Say, is that who I am, or is that how I used to act? That's a very important question. Just because I've acted that way a bunch of times in the past, am I my past, or am I who I decide to be now? Could I change my entire life right now, regardless of how I've been in the past? And because I behave that way, is that because that's who I am at the deepest level? Is that who I am at the core? Is that the essence of who I am? I doubt it. Who we are is spirit. We're more than our physical bodies. We're more than beliefs. We're more than values. Somewhere inside of you, there's a part of you that's everlasting. There's a part of you that's never ending. You need to check in with that. When you start feeling overwhelmed, or you start feeling like, I can never accomplish this, or I'm just not cut out for this, remember, you're cut out for whatever you decide to be cut out for. You have the capacity. You are bigger than any challenge you could ever meet in your life. Connect with a greater source. Remember the miracle that your life represents. See, if you just remember what's going on inside of you right now, just for you to be listening to me, all the processes, with a heart that beats constantly, pumping blood through 60,000 miles of blood vessels, that's what's inside of you. If you put them end to end, they'd wrap around the earth twice at the equator. Very thin, I might add, but it would still do it. The point of the matter is, this is the power that's inside of you. Who are you? You're a miracle. The fact that you're alive is a miracle. The fact that you're living in these times is a miracle. If you start realizing that you're a miracle, that you're a gift, if that becomes part of your definition of yourself without a big ego about it, then all of a sudden life has a different quality. The types of actions you take are different. The way you treat people is different. And the results that you generate in your life will be transformed. And part of that second lesson also is realize that you don't want to limit the view you have of the people around you. See, you don't want to look around at people around you and judge them one day. One day they're being a jerk. You don't want to then decide they're a jerk for the rest of their life. If you do that, you've destroyed the relationship you could have had with them. You don't want somebody to define you by your behavior. Everybody gets screwed up every now and then. Everybody gets in a state and does something dumb. But you don't want to have people judge you that way, so don't judge others. Always see people as being more than they see themselves as being, and you'll be able to contribute to people. Plus, people tend to respond to the expectations you have for them. I know there are exceptions, but gosh, if you're going to make a mistake, why not make a mistake at seeing people as being more than they are than less than? And by the way, we all make this mistake, and we all get angry when somebody else does it to us. I know, for example, our PR firm just recently did what they call a share of mind survey. They represent some of the biggest companies in the U.S. And what they always do with their new clients is they go out and they send out a survey to the media. And they never say who their client is. They just do a generic survey. So they send out a survey and it basically says the top people in the media, please let us pay you $60 an hour. It has $1 attached to it. And it says, please take a minute and give us your opinion. And the opinion is, in this industry, who do you think the leader is? And they just try and find out how many people mention that company. Well, you know what's interesting? They did it for our industry, meaning personal development, human development training. They said, who do you think the leader is? We felt pretty confident people were going to say yes. You know what happened? Pat Newland called me personally to say it was the most negative response she's ever gotten in her life. She said, Tony, you're in for a bit of a challenge, just so you know, because the attitude out there is horrible with the media. It was great with all the business people we sent, but in the media, it was terrible. I said, towards us? She said, no. They didn't even mention your name. They sent back the money. They never do that. She said, even if they don't fill it out, they keep the dollar. They said, we don't want this tainted money. These people are rip-off artists. They're all out to make money off other people. They don't care about anybody. Well, isn't that interesting? How are you going to go out and do an interview with somebody who already believes that and is supposedly open? That's a bit of a challenge. Now I can see why a few of my colleagues have gotten slashed so bad. I mean, I've taken a few punches every now and then, but I understand why now, because these people are looking for what's wrong. And remember, if you look for what's wrong in somebody, you'll find it. And by the way, I can't criticize 100%. I'd love to, but I've made the same mistake. Fortunately, I don't publish mine, so I can get by with it. But I remember, for example, the gentleman I'm interviewing this month, Wayne Dyer. You know, I went to go interview him, and I've been thinking about interviewing him for some time, and I didn't follow through because I'd heard some negative stuff about him. And I bought in a little bit. I wasn't sure, but I heard some things that would really bother me about, you know, what his level of commitment was to his kids and just, you know, a bunch of hearsay things. But then I sent my researchers out, and they found things in the media, you know, the articles and so forth that seemed to reinforce this view. And I started getting real judgmental, thinking, man, I don't know if I want to go interview somebody, you know, because obviously I pride myself in being, you know, so loving and connected to my family. And boy, if this person says their families, they don't have time for their family, I don't know if I want to be involved with this person. Well, who's to say whether those articles are accurate enough? I've seen enough articles to know they probably aren't. Probably misquoted. But you know what? For the moment, I started to get judgmental. And I thought, wait a second, Robbins, this is not who you are. Thank goodness I remembered who I am. I'm not judgmental. That's not what my life's about. And I caught myself being a jerk. You know, Wayne and I had met once before, but I really didn't get a chance to really visit with him or get to know him. So I stopped. And I started reading his books, and I started looking for what was great. And sure enough, when you look for what's great, you get great things. So I thought, this guy's great. He cares about people. He's got great ideas. He really wants to share with people. And so sure enough, my attitude became very excited and very enthusiastic. By the time I got to his front door where he was staying in Hawaii, I was so excited to meet him. He opened the door, and there were 7 children, all running all over the place. And they all came up and jumped on me. They grabbed my legs, and one of them jumped up in my arms, and they all said, you're a giant, lift me up on your shoulders. And I was out there laughing and having so much fun with them. For 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, I don't know what it was, we went off and just played. It was so great, and I thought, this guy is great. Look at his kids. I felt so funny and sheepish. But, you know, I really got my lesson when we sat down to talk, because Wayne was in the middle of working on his book as well, and he was so gracious to give me the time to sit down and interview him. And here I'd heard all these negative things about him, and he'd heard negative things about me. I couldn't even believe it. He said, well, I was wondering whether I was really do this interview or not. I thought, what? What are you talking about? I really got the lesson. Boy, you can't ever limit your belief about who somebody is by what you hear from somebody else. And certainly you can't judge even by your own experience in the short term, because anybody can be less than resourceful some of the time. That's a fancy word for being a jerk. Haven't you been there? So don't prejudge. Hey, we all live in a glass house. Fortunately, Wayne didn't prejudge me, and I caught myself before I prejudged him. And as a result, I have the privilege of bringing his wisdom to you through this next tape, so I hope you enjoy it. So what's the third lesson? The third lesson is make certain that you expand your view of yourself, that you write it down, and that once you've expanded your view of yourself, that you live by that view, that you fuse with it. Accept that identity as being who you are right now and do whatever that person would do. breathe the way that person would breathe, stand the way that person would stand, walk the way that person would walk, talk the way that person would talk, gesture the way that person would gesture, live with the kind of passion that person would live with. I'm telling you, if you'll do this consistently, your brain will begin to make the linkage, and pretty soon it won't just be a belief, you'll be convinced, you'll have a conviction that this is who you are. You're not trying to be something, it's who you are. And you'll never have to work on your behavior again. Your behavior will be automatic. How do you reinforce this? How do you reinforce any belief? You get some references. Think about the kinds of things that person would do and go do them. I can tell you years ago, one of the ways I began to define myself as a person who's really makes a difference, a person who's a contributor, a philanthropist, if you will. And at 18 years old, I started doing that in the prison systems. I joined Chino Prison System in California, where I came in and they matched me up with a young man who was going to get out in 2 years. And I came every month to visit with him, just donated my time. And I wasn't a seminar giver or anything like that. I just wanted to somehow touch somebody that I knew no one else probably would ever visit with. I wanted to see if I could have some kind of impact, if caring could really make a difference, even in that environment. And it did. And Carlos, the man I visited there, I got him at one point, I brought him everybody's books, Norman Vincent Peale and Think and Grow Rich and all those books that I was reading, As a Man Thinketh, Emerson's essays. I got him to start studying health. I got him to start running a couple miles a day, and his life was changed. And I never forgot that. Also, when I was 18, I started returning the favor that happened to me when I was about 11 years old, which many of you know about, which is at Thanksgiving, I started feeding people. And we got taken care of one time when we wouldn't have starved, but we were a family that 20 years ago, we weren't going to have a Thanksgiving, but somebody showed up at the door. They wanted no credit. All they knew is that we were in need, and they gave us food. They even gave us a pan to cook things in, and it touched me. And so when I was 18, I also started doing that, and that's been my tradition ever since. Every Thanksgiving, instead of going and just eating turkey, and what I do is I make sure that I go out and give thanks in the form of giving something back to other people. That's what that day means for me. And the first year I ever did it, I went out and just went to the store and I bought food for as many families as I thought I could, put those bags in my car, put it on a pair of old jeans, and I went and started finding some people that needed it. I stopped by this one church, and they told me of some families, and I came as the delivery boy, not the person giving the food, because I wasn't there for the credit. And I wrote a little note that said, hey, this note is just to tell you that somebody cares about you. Have a great Thanksgiving, and all I ask of you is that someday you take good enough care of yourself that you can do this for someone else. And as the years went by, I began to realize that that note had to be written in other languages because I brought it to some families that didn't speak English. But the bottom line is it became a tradition, and I started having my friends do it. And the reason I bring all this up is I want to mention to you, if your identity is one of a contributor, I'd like to offer you an opportunity. I've created an organization called the Anthony Robbins Foundation. And rather than talk to you about it on this tape, I'll probably talk about it on a tape on contribution as a whole. But let me just mention to you that this Thanksgiving, instead of just going out on Thanksgiving and eating, what would happen if you just took a few hours in the morning and you helped us to put together what we call our basket brigade? And you actually began to put together some food, not just in a box, but wrapped it up, food, maybe blankets and can openers for a homeless person. And you went out and you delivered this with a group of friends who are maybe Power Talk listeners or graduates of my programs to people who are in need. And again, you didn't take credit for it. You just went out and you saw them and gave it to them. I'm telling you, it will change your life. So if you're interested in this, please call my office and call for the Anthony Robbins Foundation, and we'll tell you how you can organize one in your city or how you can be part of a basket brigade there. But the point is, why do I do this? I've done it for years, and when nobody knew I was doing it, I didn't do it for acknowledgement. I did it for one reason. It's because it's part of who I am. That's the kind of person I am, and I know inside it must be the kind of person you are. And you don't have to do it my way, but whatever works for you, find a way to make sure you define yourself as a contributor, not just a person who's successful, not just a person who is doing something. And I don't mean just give somebody some money. Do something that takes a little effort on your part, something that will make you connect with other people. I can promise you it'll change your life. One of the things you could do is you could join a prison system and visit somebody once a month. Or you could do it in an old folks home with somebody who doesn't have anyone to visit them. Or maybe you could do it with a child. We have a program called the Commit To program, where you commit to help with something like the Basket Brigade once a year, and you commit to once a month do something for someone else consistently. If you're interested in the program, again, check us out. But the point is, expand your view of who you are and do things that demonstrate not only to other people, demonstrates to you that you really believe this is who you are, that you're reinforcing that so it becomes a lifestyle and not just a temporary thought pattern. I'm telling you, it'll enrich your life beyond what you've ever dreamed of. And by the way, when you think of them, one of the most painful experiences in life that people go through, one of them we have a term for. We call it an identity crisis. Why is that so painful for people? What is it? It's when people begin to question who they are and they have no idea who they're about to become. I mean, the most common example we talk about culturally, at least in America, is the person who turns 40 and they start to freak out. They'll do all kinds of weird things. What's really happening? Their identity, their perception of themselves is as a young person, but the outside environment, maybe graying hair or a little slower step or whatever it is they think is happening, is scaring them. They're afraid that it's going to change who they are and that the future identity they're going to have is going to be less attractive in some way. The truth of the matter is you can be 60, 70, or 80 and be just as young. It's our fear, though, of losing something that causes them to out and go buy some fancy cars or go do some weird things or divorce their husband or wife or whatever the case may be. We need to know that our identity is consistent through time, that whatever identity is today, that as it begins to evolve, we won't lose what we have. We'll just become even more. You never have to live in fear if you know that you're more than your behavior. You're more than your looks. You're more than what you eat or what you buy or what you wear or what you have. Who you are is never ending. Who you are is everlasting. Who you are is spirit. You know, I loved in the interview with Wayne, and again, I hope you'll take the time to listen to it. One of my favorite ways of defining identity I just picked up from him, and that is, he said, you know, Tony, I think what we really are is not human beings having a spiritual experience. He said we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Wow, what a great definition. So as you look at yourself and your life, again, remember you're more than you can define. And all you have to do is claim more of who you are. I know that sounds metaphysical, but it's true. So define yourself in a way that empowers you and live consistent with it. And make sure you define yourself as a being that's unlimited, because only through that true definition will you begin to tap more of your power and your potential. You'll never tap it all because your potential is always growing. And by the way, that taps a trigger in my mind. Unlimited is the word. This month's book summary is Unlimited Wealth. I was with Paul again a couple days ago. Paul Pilzer. He's such a brilliant man. So please read the book summary and go get his book. It'll help you once again to expand your view of the world itself. It'll change your beliefs and give you a great strategy. But for now, here's your assignment for next month. Number one, once again, define who you are. It's critical. Define how you see yourself now. 2, expand that view. 3, do the exercise where you see, hear, feel, and act as that person. 4, make certain you have a plan where you're going to start doing things that that person would do. And 5, as you now feel and behave this way, make certain that you tell everybody around you who you are. Make sure they hold you to that standard as well. I've really enjoyed visiting with you this month. I know I've gone crazy on this issue, but I hope I've got across one foundational idea. And that is this. The beliefs that will shape your life the most are the beliefs that you developed about who you are. Change your identity and you'll change your life. So do your exercises. You might want to listen to this tape more than once. Keep asking yourself the question, who am I? Keep defining yourself in larger terms and make sure your behavior is consistent with it. And I'll look forward to being with you or an expanded version of you next month. Till then, live with passion.
This program is continued on the next cassette.
Welcome to the interview portion of Power Talk. I'm here today and privileged to be with a gentleman that I'm sure you're familiar with. If I'm introducing you to him, you haven't been around very much. It's probably more of a reintroduction, and that is Dr. Wayne Dyer. We're here in Hawaii in his escape route where he's writing another book. And if you're not familiar with Wayne, you should be. Certainly he's written some of the best-selling books of all time in the area of personal development. Your Erroneous Zones, Pulling Your Own Strings, The Sky's the Limit, Gifts from ICUS, and his newest book, You'll See It When You Believe It. Wayne, I just want to first thank you for letting me get a chance to share with your family. My first introduction to you in person.
Was great. Wasn't that great?
Yeah, that was great. I walked in to see Wayne and his family, and I got attacked by 7 children.
Kids know, though, Tony. I was really impressed because when they walked in, my children are very open and very loving, but very often a stranger will walk in and they are very skeptical and they check you out first, like animals do. And they jumped right onto you. So I think there's an invisible quality that people send out. And I think if you have a love for children, that says an awful lot about you. And of course, I have it in great depth because my children are the most important things in my life. Yeah. And I can tell that you're a wonderful daddy too. It's nice having you there.
I appreciate that very much. Well, I think one of your gifts, from my perception, is the ability to have that child be totally alive inside of you. And that's where happiness comes from when it's natural. But why don't we start out by getting we always start our Power Talks finding a little background on people.
Sure.
So why don't you tell us, where did this philosophy of no limits, this lifestyle of really living life to the fullest, where did all this come from for you? Where did it start? I know you had some painful challenges starting out in your childhood.
Yeah, well, they were challenges. They weren't painful.
Oh, that's good.
Truly, they weren't. They were painful for my brother. See, I grew up I spent 6 or 7 years in a series of foster homes. My mother had 3 boys by the time she was just a very young woman, and my father had spent some time in prison, and he was abusive and an alcoholic and an irresponsible person, and he stole from everyone, and this is why he went to jail. And he also just abandoned his family when I was just an infant. I was born in 1940, and my brothers were born in 38 and 36, so there was a depression at that time. It was a horrible financial times. My mother was working as a candy girl for Kresge's on the east side of Detroit, making $17 a week and trying to feed 3 children and figure out how to deal with the beatings that she was getting and the abuse and so on. So I ended up in a series of foster homes with my brother. My oldest brother went with my grandmother, and we were all reunited when I was almost 10. I come from a position at this point in my life that there are no accidents, that the universe is on purpose.
I agree.
And I know I know your material as well as you know mine. I listen to your tapes and read your books and know that we have a lot of similarities there. And I think that the childhood experiences that you get, even the ones that we, quote, call painful, are lessons. And there are exams given, and we either pass them or we just keep repeating
the same
them. Yes,
lesson,
that's right, over and over again. Yeah. And so I look back upon that. I try to look back very objectively on those years when I was in a foster home and in the years when I was away from my mother and things were happening that everybody else would sort of categorized as horrible and painful. And when you're a kid, you don't wake up every day and say, I'm an orphan again today, isn't this awful?
Yeah. Unless somebody teaches you to think that way.
That's right, unless you process. And I was always the one in the places that I lived where a mother would bring in a new child. It was just, all it was just poverty. I mean, it was just, nobody had anything. And so everybody that ended up in these various homes was just because they didn't have anything. It wasn't anything other than that. And the mothers would bring their children in, or the church would bring a child in, and they'd always say, go get Wayne. And I was always out and back either playing or meditating or having a good time, because it was on a farm. I mean, there were chicken coops, and there was a lot of apple trees and peach trees, and it was just, to me, it was just where I was. I mean, what else do you know? Yeah. And they'd say, where's Wayne? And I'd come and they'd say, Wayne, this is Martha. I remember one time, and this little Martha was crying, and she was all upset, and they said, Wayne, teach her how to spell her name. And I was about 3 years old. I had no idea how to spell Martha. And I just started guessing at it, and she said, no, that's not right, and we went off, and it was like I was the one that somehow had my purpose, whatever it is that you want to call it, was about teaching other people that they didn't have to be depressed because of the circumstances of their life. And I seem to always have known that. My next oldest brother, Dave, didn't, and he suffered a lot in that and had some real tough circumstances later on that he created in his life, although he's beyond them now.
Did that motivate you, seeing his pain, to change your approach, do you think? Or do you think it was just inborn within you?
I just think that he has his path and I have mine, and that we are biologically connected, but that spiritually he was in a different place than I was. And a lot of the things that I believe are like you have to be generous. If you're not generous, when it's difficult, you won't be when it's easy.
Yes.
So it's like being generous was always something that I knew about, so that helping my brother was just something that was just in me. And when it was time to help him when he was an adult, it was just like you give him a certain part of what you have. And that all came back to me 1,000-fold, and it just continued to do so. His pain wasn't obvious when he was a little boy. It was like he later on in his life began to look back at that And his looking back at it, he processed it in a way that it wasn't. It really wasn't that way, because each day, I remember, we had a terrific time each day.
You make a really interesting point, because so often people who are depressed or see themselves as depressed, that's part of their identity. And they have great times throughout the day, but at the end of the day, they don't remember any of it.
Yes,
and they say,
right.
oh, I'm so depressed all the time.
I think that's one of the key differences between successful and unsuccessful people, by the way, is that successful people have a tendency to really recall the good.
Yes.
They remember. I mean, I think of my days at Mrs. Scarf's house out in Mount Clemens at 231 Town Hall Road, and I think the only painful day I can ever remember was the day that her husband died, and it was just, I just didn't understand. I mean, he was there one moment and he was gone the next, and the only other one is I had appendicitis when I was a child, and I got rushed to the hospital. But when I think of my time in the hospital with appendicitis in 1948. I remember the flowers, and I remember the people. I remember the nurses. There's a big black nurse who would come in and put us on her knee, because they had to give us penicillin in those days in these huge, and they used dull needles and huge doses. No. And she was always the one who would coddle me and take care. I mean, I remember seeing my mother every day. I mean, she came to the hospital every day after working where she was, and that was just glorious. I don't remember any other part of it, and I have a tendency to do that. I've been through a divorce, and I talked to my ex-wife, who is now remarried, and I'm remarried, and our lives are in nice places, and we're very good friends and all that. But whenever we would talk about what was going on in our marriage, she would always point out all of these things that I didn't even remember. You didn't take the kid on Halloween. I said, well, I remember being there on Halloween. I have I don't know whether I just created this or whatever, but I look back on my marriage to my ex-wife as a wonderful time. I think she was great. We just had to move along. I've never looked back and thought, oh, isn't that awful? Never done that.
Well, you talk so much about having reality-based thinking. And yet, isn't reality based on whatever we focus on?
Oh, yeah. Reality is just what I think about all day long. We are what we think about all day long. And it's like, that's the most important learning I think I have come to over the years, is that this body that we're in is really just like it's like a garage where we park our soul, you know. It's just a place to put it, you know, and so you take good care of it and you do all of that, but this isn't what it is. I've talked often about when my grandmother died, and they weighed her just before she went to the hospital. She weighed 133 pounds, and life left her body. Her body didn't weigh any less. I mean, her very life was invisible and weightless, as is everyone who's listening to it now. Yes. So you're just sort of trapped in this body temporarily, and you ought not to be thinking of it as who you are, but your reality is how you process it. Yeah. And that's one of the great lessons. I was talking to one of your producers, John, yesterday about somebody here who had come up to me and was very negative toward me, which is very rare. Do I ever attract anything like that? So this morning I was meditating on that, thinking, why did I attract this negative person who was very angry at me for being on his property when I shouldn't be, or something like that? And I kept getting back in the meditation, and it's like it bothered me for a whole day. And then I was like over it in a second, satori, instant awakening. It was like, this is only a problem for you because you process it. The guy who came into your life in a negative way is just the path that he's on. Yeah. Your reality is how you are living with it. Yes. You know, it's like he came in to teach you a lesson. Yes. And the lesson is that you don't have to process him like that any longer. And it was gone. I realized that it was all totally within my power to let him go and to send him love. And I did. I sent him a couple of books. I found out where he works, and and I sent him a lesson. It may take him 20 years before he even reads it. Or he may never get it on this path. He may have to go through it all kinds of times and carry around that arrogance. But it's not mine. I don't have to own any of that. Yeah. It's a wonderful. It's the most freeing thing you have in the world, to know that you can process life any way you want to.
Now, when you say process, let's clarify that. You really mean changing the way you think about things, the questions you ask yourself,
process
the way you
it internally. Absolutely, yeah.
You've gone through an incredible evolution, and in the spotlight, since 1976, I guess, is when your first book came out, right? And I was just a kid. I was 16 watching you, but I remember seeing you on TV. Yes.
I got sandals older than you. What am I doing in this interview?
But I remember watching you on television and thinking, that guy's hot. You know, this guy really, he's saying what's really true. You know, you didn't have anything else about you but what you really felt, and you were so clear in your communication that it stunned people.
Yeah, it was true. But, I had a sort of not arrogance, but an enormous amount of confidence.
Yes. They didn't know how to deal with that.
No. I can remember being on the Donahue Show and the Tonight Show and a few shows like that, and saying things that they were so shocked at that they asked me to come back the next week. And I wasn't doing it for shock value. It was literally what I'd been saying all my life, only I just had a bigger audience. I mean, I'd been saying it as a school teacher, and I'd been saying it as a college professor, and at the lectures that I gave. And
you were a therapist for a while, too, right?
Oh, yeah, for many, many years. Yeah.
Now, what made you decide to write a book in the beginning?
Writing is the way I just express my soul. Writing isn't something I do. Writing is something that I am, and therefore it just comes out. I have to write. I mean, like Picasso had to paint, you know, and or it's like asking my wife, well, you know, why are you such a great mother? You know, I mean, mothering is who she is, and she's just absolutely divine at it. Writing I've been doing since I wrote my first novel when I was about 15 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and when I was in the Navy, I spent 4 years in the military after high school, and I wrote 3 books while I was in the service. None of them were ever published. And I wrote maybe 100 essays, mostly on the things that I found objectionable about the military. You know,
that's probably why they weren't published.
And I would design ways to get around it without being beaten down by it, because I realized I couldn't beat the United States government and the United States Navy, and I couldn't, you know, give speeches about how absurd it was. But I also didn't have to be inspected. You know, where they would come along and stand you up and make you, you know, shine your shoes in a certain way. I just figured out in my mind, which is where everything begins, in your mind, how could I get away with not ever getting inspected again and still be a part of this system? And in 4 years, I never had another inspection after I left boot camp.
How did you pull that off?
Every time an inspection would come along, I would figure out a way to be someplace else, where it would absolutely be necessary for me to be someplace else. The only time that I was a little bit devious was when I had somebody, when I tempted somebody to steal my shoes, so that I couldn't go. I had to leave them out, but I would rather have lost my shoes and buy a new pair than to have...
A man who needs to express his individuality and freedom anyway, whatever is necessary.
It's true. It absolutely is true.
Fantastic.
And I left the service knowing that I wouldn't ever go back to that. And it was the great lesson of being in the military. The great lesson is that life, in your life, you have to learn not only what you love, but what you don't love. And you have to experience, I think, what you don't like, and then know it, and then know how to go beyond that.
And spend the time in the place you want to live and how you want to be. That's neat. I know when you put your first book together, well, first of all, can I mention what you shared with me downstairs?
Sure, you can mention anything.
Oh, I appreciate that. I got a chance to visit with Wayne downstairs in his room where he's doing his writing here in Hawaii, and I was amazed at, there are some similarities between us, but I think maybe even more extreme on your part. And that is, when I'm writing, I'm constantly pulling out all kinds of ideas from many different sources, but there are like 50 or 60 books strewn out all around where Wayne sits and writes. And he bounces along and pulls from each of these. Now, why don't you describe a little bit about how you write, because I think it's how you live. There's a great deal of trust there.
It's called surrendering. I learned to do it about 10 years ago when I really honed this, and that was when I was speaking in Houston. There were about 3,500 people who had all paid a lot of money to come and hear me, and it was an evening with Wayne Dyer. And I had all my notes all arranged in exactly the way I wanted to, and everything was just exactly perfect. I was backstage doing the pacing that you do before you go on, and the meditating and the breathing, and the just getting yourself relaxed, and the sort of divine guidance that you're seeking. And I realized that I didn't have my notes. They were gone. And they were back in the hotel room, which was 30 minutes away, and I was going on in 10 minutes. So I walked out on stage without any notes for the first time, and I surrendered. In that 10-minute period of time, I just said, all right, you know what you're doing, and you know how to do it, and you're good at this, and you're here for a reason, and there are 3,501 people in this room, and you're the one who's speaking, and 3,500 have paid to come and hear you. There must be a reason for that, and so get on purpose. Get on purpose. Get off of your outcome. Get off of how well you do. Get off of how much money you're being paid. Get off of all of that, and get on to what are you here for? And you're here to improve the quality of life for somebody else. That's all you can do. When you leave this planet, the measure of your life won't be in what you accumulated. It will be in what you gave. Since you can't get anything anyway, it's in giving. So I surrendered, and that was the beginning for me of surrendering. I've never used notes since in my life. It's not that I'm not prepared. I meditate before, and I know what I want to do, and I do that now with my writing. It gets to a point where you absolutely have a knowing. There's 2 ways to learn. One way is through fear and doubt, and so you learn through suffering, or another way is to learn through knowing, just an absolute knowing that you have guidance available to you, and that you're not alone, and that you can handle this, and that you have a choice to feel that way right now, no matter what's happening in the environment. Absolutely. So I surround myself with the people and the books and the ideas and the things that I want. And I know that they will be there. I have an idea like the book that I'm writing now is about, it's called Real Magic, and it's about manifesting miracles in your life. So I know the areas I want to write about, and the areas of prosperity and creating health in your life and in your relationships and in your relationship to yourself and these kinds of things. I know about that. So I know what my chapter titles are and my headings are and things like that. And the rest of it, I just absolutely trust. And when I stop, I was going to say stuck, but I don't get stuck. I don't have anything called writer's block anymore. I can write forever. I mean, my typewriter just goes and goes and goes. And sometimes it goes so fast that it smokes. I mean, it's just going.
Well, part of the problem is you've got a typewriter there.
Right.
That's an interesting point. You've got a typewriter down there. Is it the same typewriter you used to write your original book?
Yeah, it's the same typewriter. I've written everything I've ever written.
A Smith Corona?
It's an old one, yeah. Yeah.
Well, you talk about living in the now. Now there are computers, Wayne.
Yeah,
What's the deal here? Why do you stay with the typewriter?
I have a thing about computers. I have some judgment there that I probably have to work on. But they
you got to forgive your computers.
I do. Yeah, they collect so much information. There's sort of a Big Brother-ish kind of thing about computers.
Something that can take away freedom.
Yes, huh? Yeah. There is something like that, and it's like you press a button, and everything that you ever did when you wet your pants back. I know it's written in there somewhere. You know? All of the skeletons I have in my closet are in somebody's computer.
So you don't want to contribute to that.
Could be paranoia, but maybe not. But anyway, it's this trusting that you get to that allows you to not just to write well or not just to speak well, which is what I do, whether you're driving a cab or whether you're a dentist or whatever. It's what they call flow. Have you seen the book Flow?
Yes, I have.
It's not I can't pronounce the author's name, but it's Sizagaka Blinsky or something like that. But it's a fabulous, the whole notion that you get past judgment, and I do this in my tennis. I play tennis every day at a pretty decent club level. And I have found my best tennis flows from when I'm off of outcome and I'm on purpose, when I'm just out there being. You know?
What I'm impressed by you is to see your children, because your children live by flow.
Yeah, they do.
You know, I mean, when you walk in there and they attack you and love you and jump all over you and say, well, you know, that was my highlight. Meeting you was wonderful, but we've met before.
Yes, that's right.
Meeting your kids is really the peak experience. I got to tell you.
But you see, they're like that because my wife Marcy is like that, and I'm like that.
Yes.
Our relationship is like that.
Yes.
And I really believe that children emulate what they see around them. If you want to teach your children, you don't have to read a lot of books about how to do it. You just have to model what it is you'd like them to become. Just be that around them all the time. We get on a plane. Now, we've been coming here to Hawaii since those children were infants. Right? They were conceived. All of them were conceived right here in Hawaii. I mean, this is a very, very special, magical place.
You better be careful.
Yes, I know. We're sweating that out right now.
An eighth child.
Right.
Oh, my gosh.
But when we get on the plane, we live in Florida. Now, we come to Hawaii. Now, that's halfway around the world, all right? That's a 13-hour deal. And when we get in the back of a plane, we fill up a plane. Those children, every single time, we never give them any instructions. We never tell them you have to be good, you better not say anything, or we're going to get you, or anything like that. We just get on the plane. And when we get off, everybody on the plane always comes up to us and talks about all of our children and how wonderful they are. Yeah. They're there, they're in the moment, they enjoy the plane. If there's a movie, it doesn't matter if they've seen it 16 times. They watch the movie, they're playing with the stereo stuff, they're listening to stuff, they walk around, I mean, but they're always very peaceful, they're very joyful, and they meet other people on the plane, and they even calm down other babies around them. Just like they say about Christ, you know, or Mother Teresa. When they walk into a village, they change, just their presence changes the consciousness of the room because they radiate something very special. And that all comes from the kind of relationship that my wife and I have. And
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that most people try and teach their kids what to do, but they live a different lifestyle. And kids don't listen to what you say. They do what
cigarettes
you do.
And telling their kids, now you shouldn't use drugs.
Where's the
incongruence
in that
income tax and
message?
talking about it. I can't understand why their children lie.
No kidding.
They don't get it.
No kidding. No kidding. Yeah. Tell me, I know you have a discipline of running, and you were doing that right before this interview.
Yes.
You've been doing it every day for how long?
I started running, my first 8-mile run was October the 7th, 1976. This is 1991. In October of this year, I will have completed 15 years without missing a day of running a minimum of 8 miles.
That's amazing.
It's like Lou Gehrig. Remember Lou Gehrig's great streak of all those years? Now it's a streak. You know?
Yeah, it'd be painful to stop.
Right.
More
I was telling you downstairs, some people I've been accused of in different magazines, where people say, well, that's obsessive compulsive. And I say, well,
it's a great obsession.
Yeah, you go to the bathroom every day and you brush your teeth every day. You don't call that obsessive. That's just something that you are. It's something you do for maintaining the health of your garage, of your body, you know, and that's what I do. And as a result of doing that, and meditating along with it, I haven't had a day of illness in 15 years. I've had a few fevers, I've had a few this and that, a few sniffles, but I haven't had anything, any influenza, any colds, anything that would keep me from running that distance. And I've had I'm an athlete, so I've had some bad injuries to my legs and all of that, but I've always been able to run right through them. And instead of it taking weeks and weeks and weeks for these pulls and these injuries to heal, they're usually healed in a day or two. because I think circulation is not only the key to understanding the universe, it's the key to understanding the universe that you are. You've got to keep yourself circulating all the time. You can't let an old person move into your body. You know?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I say behind every old person is a young person saying, "What the heck happened?"
Yeah, that's right. You know? I remember when I was teaching psychology, I came across a great poster. It was a whole line of babies, this little face, and they were all gurgling and laughing, and just like the ones that you just saw downstairs.
Yes.
And then underneath it were another row of pictures with all these old people who were just all sitting there and depressed and looking down and unhappy and with scowls on their face. And the heading said, "What happened?"
Yeah. Let me ask you, what is your major focus of what you're trying to share now? Or let me come back to what I started to ask you earlier. I said, you've gone through a tremendous evolution. How do you perceive that evolution in your own life over the last 15 years or so?
The evolution is one of, instead of teaching people how to manage their emotions or how to avoid being victimized, I think it's the difference between self-help and self-realization, I guess. What I write about is always just a reflection of what I'm going through in my life. My writing is always very personal. The examples come out of my own experience in my own life. And my life has undertaken a dramatic transformation from a person who used to be a human being having a spiritual experience, as I said, to a spiritual being having a human experience. And I know...
profound difference there.
Yes, it is. And I know that who I am is divine. I'm a divine necessity, and each person listening is as well. And I know that there's a grand purpose, a heroic mission that every one of us has on this planet. And I think that my lessons have been much more spiritual, much more peaceful. Consequently, my life has become much more peaceful. And when my life is in harmony and serene, then my writing is that way. I think my writing flows more now. I think my message is that I know I'm not alone. I know that, and I guess if I know I'm not alone and I can go to a higher place within myself, that I believe that anybody can. That the same intelligence that flows through you is the same intelligence that flows through me. The only reason that I can't wiggle your finger is because I believe that I'm separate from you. You know, but it's a oneness that is there. And I've met a beautiful, beautiful man. I'm sure you'll be interviewing him shortly on one of your programs. If you will. His name is Deepak Chopra.
Oh, yes. My wife Becky met him recently, and he's invited us to come out
Deepak
visit
and I
him,
have become very, very friendly.
Incredible man.
Yeah, he is. And as a matter of fact, my wife just was diagnosed as having a cold nodule on her thyroid and was told that it was 2.5 centimeters and that she would have to have surgery. She went to 3 different endocrinologists, specialists, and each of them said that she would have to have surgery. And that same day I met Deepak, the same day that we thought that my wife might have cancer. They said it could be cancerous and they couldn't take a chance. And that very same day, Deepak and I were doing a program together in Seattle, and we were, along with Louise Hay and Shakti Gawain and Kriyananda, and it was a very, very special day. And Deepak and he came to me, here's this man who's a physician and who grew up studying under Maharishi. I mean, just a brilliant man. And I'm ready to just bow to him, and he's bowing to me, telling me how much he loves me and how much he appreciates my work and all that. And we became like soul brothers. I mean, it was like a man I experienced love for instantaneously. And he invited Marcy to come up to his Ayurvedic medicine place up in Lancaster, Massachusetts. And she spent a week up there for the first time in 10 years that she slept alone, that she has been away from the children or away from me. And she went up there alone, and our 16-year-old daughter, we absolutely knew that she could handle this. And she handled 5 children for a week and just became, I mean, an unbelievable mother, from sort of a wild kind of teenager who likes to go out and be a teenager, I mean, to a totally, completely responsible person, because we believed that she could do it.
Yes.
And my wife went up there for a week and worked with Deepak, and he gave her herbs and oils and
she cleansed her system.
She came back, and in 1 week's time, Tony, she went back to the 3 endocrinologists, and the cold nodule is gone.
That's fantastic.
It's gone.
That's fantastic.
But she never believed for a second. I mean, it isn't like she said, oh, maybe I have cancer, but. It wasn't like that. She absolutely said, I'm not having surgery. I'm not interested in this. I know that I can do this. I know I can get rid of this. And all I have to do is just get my body balanced. And that's what Ayurveda taught her. That's
Yes.
what Deepak. So we're doing a program together for Nightingale
Oh,
Conant.
that's exciting.
East meets West, kind of. And he said to me, he said, it's real interesting. He said, I came to the same conclusions about personal transformation and spirituality and this divineness. He said, I was raised in that tradition and I went through medicine and I'm a scientist. He said, you grew up on the streets of Detroit and you came to the same kind of conclusions. And
Truth is truth.
yeah, and it's like here we are now talking about various levels of higher consciousness, the different levels that you can reach in your life, and it's been magnificent. It's really been a joy to be associated with it, and that's really the difference between now and then. I mean,
Right.
you talk about the transformation. The real difference is that I know I'm not alone now, and I know that there's a divineness that's in all of us.
What triggered that knowingness? Because so many people know it intellectually, but they don't embody it emotionally.
I try to think of what it was, because we're always looking for things in the physical world that describe, what it is that happened. But there's a word in Zen tradition called satorai. We don't have a translation for it in English because we don't do it.
That's a real good point.
Yeah.
We don't have a word, we don't have an
That's right,
experience.
That's right. But it's like, in Japanese it's called shibumi. It's effortless perfection or instant awakening. And where you just have this knowing, and it's like I can go back and I could give you right here a whole lot of circumstances that happened in my life when I went to my father's grave, but then it turns out that I had all this hatred towards my father for all these years.
Don't run through this story, because this is an important story.
Yeah.
Maybe you can share that with us, because
Yeah.
I know it was a profound experience in your life.
It truly was.
When was this, first of all?
It was 1974, just
Okay.
before I wrote Erroneous Zones, like months before I wrote Erroneous Zones,
Wow.
like days before I wrote Erroneous Zones.
Had you seen him at any time
I
since you
never
left
saw
your
him.
family?
Never saw him.
Never saw him.
Never saw him. He did.
Period.
He left and walked away on a wife and 3 boys, and never ever showed up again. Just was gone. My mother was so full of hatred towards this man, and I used to think that was probably the greatest gift that he gave us. I think he somewhere within him had a knowing that his presence in our lives would only serve to hold us back, would be more, but somehow I'm always looking for the good.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the pony. I mean, I'm always
Yeah.
thinking that there's something good in somebody, and that my greatest regret was always that I never got a chance to meet him, because I grew up being taught to hate him.
Yeah.
My brothers remembered him. They were older. I was the baby. I didn't have that hate in me for anything or anyone, and I still don't. So, do you want me to tell the story?
Yeah, would you? I think it's very powerful.
It was. I went down to Columbus, Mississippi. I was teaching at St. John's University in Queens. You were 14. No.
That's right.
And it's interesting. I haven't thought of this in quite a while. I had a cousin who was my father's sister's child, whose name was Dorothy Phillips, who I had just met a couple of times. They would never give any information about my father. I was always looking for my father. I spent a lot of time looking for my father.
Why'd you want to find him?
I wanted to meet him in a bar. I had a fantasy of just going to a bar and sitting down and saying, "I'm your son. And this was long before I became well known or anything.
Yes.
This was I just wanted to know who this guy was,
Yeah.
When his mother died, I found out his mother died. I went to the funeral, and I was only 13. I was the only one that went, and I went only because I was hoping that he would show up, just so I could meet him, but he didn't come.
Wow.
Anyway, I spent a lot of time looking for him, and then I would always run out of money, or I would run out of desire, or I was just being guided to stay away. Because I know now, see, I can just interject that I know now, because I have conversations with my father, and I can see my father in my meditations.
Yeah.
I mean, his soul is there, and in many ways it guides me. I mean, I really think that his life was a lesson for me in how not to do things.
Yeah.
And so I've used it that way, and I see the blessing there. But anyway, 1974 rolls around. I'm 34 years old, and I go down to, I'm invited to go to Columbus, Mississippi to do an investigation of the civil rights legislation that had been just passed in the 60s when Johnson was president, and to see whether some of these colleges in the South were abiding by them. And I was just like a federal consultant, and I would go on campus sort of incognito, and I would sit in classes, and I would write my report, and then I would send it back. And I agreed to do this for a weekend, and Dorothy, meantime, had called and left a message that she said, your father is dead. And I didn't know this up until then.
Wow.
Yeah, she said, your father is dead. He died in New Orleans, and she gave me the date that he died. And she said, he's been dead for a while. And I was like, it was a shock. I called my mother. I said, did you know that? I asked my nobody, none of us knew that. He'd been dead 7 or 8 years. So I got down to Columbus and I looked on a map and I was only 200 miles from New Orleans, and I called the infirmary where she gave me the name of the infirmary, and he was an indigent, and they said they found out that he died of cirrhosis of the liver, and he was 49 years old, and they said we don't have any record of where his body as an indigent was just shipped to Biloxi, Mississippi. So I said, "Oh, I'm going to Biloxi." I was on a journey then, and this was a spooky time for me, and it gives me that Kundalini feeling right now.
I can feel it.
Yeah, I get very teary when I think about it, and I went to the rent-a-car place, the National Rent-a-Car, and there was only one rent-a-car place, and this is a dinky little town in Mississippi. Okay, at the Mississippi State College for Women, I think it was, and. I went to the rent-a-car place, and they had one car, and the car was a brand new car. It was a 1974 Dodge Coronet. Okay, it was a blue, and it had no miles on it. 0.9. I said, what? Did they make this car here? How did this car get here? And that car had been shipped in that day, and I was the first person to drive the car. And it was so new that the plastic was on the seats. All right. And I had to take the plastic off of the covering.
Interesting
on the
metaphor, huh?
Yes, right. Yeah. So I got in, and there was no seat belt. There was only one seat belt on the right-hand side. There was no left-hand seat belt. And they didn't even have shoulder belts in those days. So I got out of the car, and I took this, because I've got that sort of determination in me that I'm wearing a seat belt. And I got out of the car, and I took the seat right out of the car and put it on the ground, and there was the other seat belt taped to the floorboard of the car. And it was masking tape. It was wrapped in plastic, the buckle, wrapped in all this plastic. There was a rubber band around it, and then it was taped to the floorboard, obviously to protect it from cutting the upholstery in transit. And I took all of this stuff off of it and unwrapped it and all that, and inside the buckle, there's a card, and it says, a business card, inside the buckle of this brand new car. This is a true story. And it said, Candlelight Inn, Biloxi, Mississippi. So I took the card, and I just said, that's interesting. I'm going to Biloxi. It's 200 miles away, a 4-hour drive. It was on a Friday afternoon. I put the card in my pocket, and I drove down to Biloxi. And I didn't think much about it. In fact, I picked up a hitchhiker on the way, and a kid who was, a migrant fruit picker, and I took him someplace else, and I went about an hour out of my way to take him somewhere. And we finally got to Biloxi. I got to Biloxi, and it was about 10 minutes to 5 on Friday afternoon. I think it was the 22nd of August. Reader's Digest is doing this in a story because, so they've checked out every detail of this, okay? I mean, every detail.
Oh.
And I went to the phone book in the gas station outside of Biloxi. When it said, welcome to Biloxi, I went into the next desk, and I just looked under cemeteries. I was just figured he's got to be buried in Biloxi. What else would they do with him, you know? And I didn't realize that I was on a real journey at this time. And I called the first cemetery, and there was no answer, and the second one, it was busy, and the third one was a real small listing, like it was an inferior cemetery. Maybe they didn't bury them real deep or something, I don't know. But it was like a real tiny list. So I called it, and it turns out it was just a cemetery plot on the back of another piece of property. And an old man came to the phone. And they kept their records in Coca-Cola can boxes. The Coca-Cola came in. He had to go back. He said, well, we don't have records here exactly. I said, I want to see if a Melvin Lyle Dyer is buried here. And he was gone for what seemed like an eternity, but he came back and he said, yes. He said, he's buried here. And my heart was just beating as fast as you could imagine. I said, well, how do I get there? I'm in Biloxi, and I want to come over there. I really feel like I need this. It's my father, and I've never met him. And he said, well, I got the death certificate right here. He said, he's buried. He said, your father's buried on the grounds of the Candlelight Inn.
Oh, my God.
And he said, just find that, and it's just inside of town. And I reached into my pocket. It's a true story.
That's incredible.
And I took the card, and on the back of the card is a map imprinted on how to get to the Candlelight Inn. I mean, it's printed. It's got these arrows that go to... And I was only 6 blocks away, and I put it back, and that's when I started getting the BGBs, whatever you call them, heebie-jeebies. And I went to the gravesite, and this was in August of 1974, and I stood there. I was 34 years old, and I stood there, and I was sobbing. There was just a little plate on the ground that said Melvin Lyle Dyer. And I sobbed, and I sobbed, and I cried, and I talked, and I was there for 2.5 hours. It was almost like there was magnets on my feet. I couldn't leave. It was till 7:30. In fact, there was no entrance there. I just had to. There was just a chain across there. He asked me. He said, "When you leave, just put the chain up across," because they didn't want other vandals and that driving through there. And I left there, and what I did in that time, which was so significant for me, and it's why I think of it as an event that was like an unfolding in my life.
Spiritual awakening.
Yeah, it was a spiritual awakening. It was like I forgave my father. That's what I had to do, and
Yet you didn't think you were angry with him.
No, but I was filled with, like, when I would dream, when I'd go to sleep at night, I would wake up in a rage. And I mean, I would be sweating. I would just be, and I would have my father in my hand, and I would be hitting him, and I would be doing, and I didn't even know what he looked like. So I mean, it was just, and I was still being fed all of this stuff. And my mother, who's in her mid-70s now, still has a tremendous amount of anger towards this man. Has not forgiven this man yet. It's still, and I think of forgiveness. I mean, I've studied this now, and I wrote a whole chapter about it, and you'll see it when you believe it. Forgiveness. Mark Twain had a wonderful definition of it. He said, "Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it." Isn't that beautiful?
Ooh, that is about as beautiful thing I've ever heard. Oh, that's amazing.
And it's like, I think of forgiveness as like a snake bite. You know, it's like you get bit by a snake and you can't unbite yourself. I mean, but nobody ever died from a snake bite. A snake bite doesn't kill you, it's just a bite, you know, and we get bit all the time in all different metaphorical ways. What kills you isn't the bite, it's the venom that circulates after the bite. Well, mentally or metaphysically, the venom that circulates in you after the bite, after the things that have been done to you, is the hatred and the anger and the unforgiveness. And you think of Christ on a cross, and you think of a soldier, remember, from King of Kings. I'll never forget that image. And Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What he's really saying there is, they don't know that they're throwing a spear into themselves when they throw a spear into me, that we're all connected, that we're all one. And until you get rid of that venom, it will destroy you. So whatever it was that I was carrying around towards my father, which was being manifested in all kinds of conscious and unconscious ways in my life, I let it go in that moment. And it was like my father was there with me, Tony. I mean, he was just, and he's with me now. I mean, in fact, I can feel his presence here now as we speak. Always saying to me, like, where I am, there's no judgment. You know, there's no good or bad here. There's no right or wrong in this. There's just like, tell my story if it's going to help somebody to forgive somebody, you know. And that was my purpose. And every time I do something that is generous and loving and good and helpful to other people, I feel like my father's smiling on me. And once I forgave him, it's funny because in my life at that time, that's when I was getting divorced. I was going through a struggle. That's when I was overweight, like 25 or 30 pounds. I wasn't running. I didn't start running till the year after that. And my writing was really suffering. I was writing professional article stuff just to publish or perish, okay? That's where I was. I was trying to get published in different professional magazines and all of that kind of thing, and I'd send stuff in. It was just stuff that, you wouldn't want to read because it was just quoting everything else, and it was, the kind of professional stuff that everybody does. They write to each other. Nobody else reads it. And then when you do write something that appears in Family Circle or Reader's Digest or whatever, or even the National Enquirer, 5 million people read it. I mean, give me 5 million neurotic people reading the Enquirer to fix.
That's right.
Rather than a whole bunch of people who are just going to write back in another letter to me only in the form of another article. So I let all of that go. And I went back, and Erroneous Zones I wrote in 18 days.
In 18 days?
18 days.
Wow.
18 days. Now, and there's 22 million of those in print today.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
This program is continued on the opposite side.
It didn't take off right away. You had to take some action.
It didn't take off at all, no. They had one printing, and they expected it to do very little. And
they met their expectations.
Yeah, they were. They told me they had what they call a list mentality. They said, this is the list. You're on the March list. And it's a clever little title, and it's a nice little book. And if we sell the books that are on our list, they had a first printing of 3,500, then we'll be happy, and you'll make a little money, and we'll make a little, and then we'll move on to the next list in April, and so on. And that was the mentality. And that's a big part of the mentality in publishing today, as you know. So I just said, well, what will happen if the first printing sells out? Just if. I know it won't. I mean, that's what you're saying. It won't. But just if. His name was Lou. All right? And Lou said, wait. He said, you're an unknown. He said, it's 3,500 books on hardcover at $7, $6.95. I mean, that was like an outrageous price to put on the book at that time. I said, but just if. And he said, well, if they do, we'll have to put a second printing. I said, okay, fine. And so I became, they wouldn't let me buy them. I tried to buy them, they wouldn't let me. So I became a bookstore. I was in New York at the time, and all you have to do to become a bookstore is just give them a number in Albany, and you're a bookstore. So I became a bookstore by just giving them a tax number. And through that tax number, which I gave them the address of the bookstore that my garage was to become in Long Island, it's true. And I called that day and I ordered 3,350 copies of Your Erroneous Zones, and they were shipped to the garage.
So you sold it out.
I sold it, and I went back to Lou 2 days later. I said, Lou, what will happen if we do sell it? He said, Wayne, you've got to stop bothering me. It's like you're another one of these beginning authors. I said, well, just check the computer, just see how it's doing, because I said, I've been doing a lot of speaking, and I think, and he went to his computer, it's a true story, I could even tell you his last name, Gullickson, and he went to the computer, he said, oh my God, this book is doing fantastic, we sold out the whole first printing. So they ordered a second printing, 1,500, they didn't want to take too much of it.
Oh no.
Yeah. I bought all those up too.
Oh,
I bought the second printing, and by that time they didn't have any money for distribution, they didn't have any advertising money, they didn't have any of that, because they just didn't do that in those days. So I said, I'm going on the road, and I quit my job as a professor at St. John's. I walked in, and I had all these publication credits, and I was like a rising star there. And they said, "You're insane. You've got guaranteed tenure for the rest of your life. You've got a position. Yeah, right. Yeah, you can argue for your misery for the rest of your life, you know." And I resigned, and everybody thought I was nuts, except my wife and I. We both knew that this was the right thing. The day I resigned from doing something that I no longer was totally involved in. I was good at it, but I didn't want to do it. It was like drill. You know, I mean, after you've drilled enough, it's just enough. Drill is drill, okay, but you don't need to keep doing it. I learned that in the military. So I drove home on the Long Island Expressway that day, the freest man I'd ever felt. I knew I was about to follow my bliss. I really knew it. And I didn't have any guarantee of any income or anything. The interesting thing about that is that in the following year and a half, I made more money. I was 36 years old now at that time. I made more money without even trying. I never thought for a minute that I would make money because I hadn't made any money on anything I'd written yet.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Why would
writing.
This be different?
Yeah, I wasn't writing for money. I was writing because writing was just something that that's how I expressed myself. That's just who I am. And I made more money in the next 18 months than I had made in the previous 35 years of my life, like by a factor of 10. And
you were just going out and sharing your philosophy with radio stations?
I took the books in a station wagon across the country, and I would. This is the way I did it. If you want to know how I did it, I would arrive in a town like Columbus, Ohio, where they have they have Good Morning Columbus on the radio, you know. And if you've got a new avocado dip, you're on for an hour. You know, I mean, they're looking for people. Okay, every station's got a talk show, so you just have to find out who they were. And I had a girl back in New York named Donna Gould who was working for the publisher, but was willing to work for nothing at night. Just because she loved Erroneous Zones and loved me and loved the whole thing. I mean, she was just involved in the whole process. She really loved it. And so she would call these different stations and all that and book me on Good Morning Columbus and Good Afternoon Columbus and Hello Columbus and Goodbye Columbus and, you know, and all of this kind of thing. And, and I would have my car full of books. I would arrive in Columbus. I was sleeping in the car. I mean, I did this. I had no money to do this with. Right? And I would sneak showers. I would figure out how to take free showers, you know, in days inns and things, you know. But
you had a committed wife.
Yeah.
Now, was your wife traveling with you?
Yeah, well, sometimes. Sometimes. She was also working.
Wow.
And I would go to the bookstores. And first I would telephone them call them up, and I'd say, have you got a book called Your Erroneous Zones? And I would do it in like 9 different dialects. You've got Erroneous, Erroneous, and I'd do it in German, and I'd do it in Dutch, and then if my wife was with me, she would call, and I'd get these people to call and ask for Erroneous. It's true, this is exactly what we did. Create
the demand. I love it. I love it.
But I knew I was going to create the demand. I mean, I didn't think I was doing anything immoral. I was just creating the demand for what it was that I believed in. And besides, I had 5,000 books I had to get rid of because I had no distribution at all. So
you were what we call committed. Huh?
That's right. I was totally involved in the process. And then I would go on the air. Okay. And I would do what we're doing now. I never tried to sell my books. I never gave the title out. I never said, oh, by the way, my new book is called, and oh, yes, my book is this, and you've seen this on the air. And every time somebody does that, you say, well, they're not involved in it. They're just trying to sell me something, and you move away. I didn't do that. I was just selling myself as a person. I was just talking like we're talking. And when people talk and are committed and are involved and are authentic and are enthusiastic about what they're saying,
People respond.
People want to know
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
They just want to know more. It's why I let everybody tape all my talks. I never deny anybody to tape to this day.
Yeah.
In fact, I not only allow it, I insist on it. And I don't take a cent for it. Anytime I speak, I say, if I'm on purpose, rather than an outcome,
Yeah.
if I'm on purpose and in the process, then my purpose is to get the message out. That's where I've got to be centrally focused. Not on what's going to come back to me, not on royalties,
Right.
just on that. So I allow every church, every organization, you can tape me, and you can do anything you want with the tapes. Anything you want. You want to sell them to your customers and all of that. Just don't put them into bookstores and make a legal conflict
Yeah,
for me with
competition for it,
publishers.
sure.
Yeah, just legal problems.
Sure.
But otherwise, do anything you want with them. Because I figure all that can happen is something good. What can happen if somebody hears an interview of mine other than they say, gee, I want to hear more of that guy. And off they go to the bookstore, or off they do, they call for the tapes and all. Nothing but good can happen.
That's true.
And then you keep circulating it and so on. So, I mean, I learned that about 3 years ago when my agent kept saying that you can't tape Wayne Dyer. Now I have a clause in there that says, I insist that you tape me. And do whatever you want with the tapes.
That's true.
So I was like on that process. Then I would finish at the interview, and I would go to the same bookstore, and I'd say, by the way, I'm here in Columbus, the Little Professor bookstore. This is one of them I can remember very well. And I said, I just did AM Columbus, and I'm going to do this afternoon's Columbus, and I'm going to do all of this. And the guy said, my God, we've already had 10 phone calls. Well, hell, I knew I'd made it. And I said, well, can I just leave 25 of my books here, and if they don't sell, then you can send them back to me, and here's the address, and it won't cost you anything. Just send them back to you. Sure, he said, absolutely. We've already had calls for them. And sure enough, they were getting calls. People were going in there.
Sure.
And that's how I distributed my book. I did that in Columbus. I did that in Baltimore. I did that in Jacksonville. I did it in Tampa. I went to almost every, I shouldn't say every state, but I went to about 75% of the states in the country at my own expense, in my own little car, 6 months on the road. And then finally, the book hit the bestseller list. And it was interesting because the Tonight Show was the show that everybody wanted to get on in those days. That's when it was an hour and a half. And that story is so phenomenal. I don't know how our time is.
We're fine.
The story of getting on that show, because my Donna was always trying to get me on the show. And she'd call the Tonight Show, she'd call them, and they'd say, if we hear the name Wayne Dyer one more time, I'm not... It turns out that a friend of mine now, a very good friend named Howard Papish, was working on the show, and someone had placed a copy of Erroneous Zones in his briefcase, and he was flying back to Los Angeles, and he happened to pick out that book and read it on the plane. Well, he called me, and he asked me if I would be willing to fly out to Los Angeles and do a pre-interview for The Tonight Show. I said, no, I'm busy putting up my screens. I can't do that. What do you mean, can't I come out to Los Angeles? Sure enough, I flew out to Los Angeles, and I went out there. And it's so interesting when you get off of trying to get something and just stay on purpose.
Yes.
It's that great quote from Thoreau, if you advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams, endeavor to live the life which you've imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. You want to talk about an unexpected thing. I couldn't get on one national show, Tony. I couldn't get on the Donahue Show. I couldn't get on the Today Show. These are all shows that I've done 100 times since.
Yes.
But I couldn't get on any of them because they said that, who are you?
Trying to force it.
Yeah, and I was forcing it. That's right. I was pushing it. But there's another way to reach everybody in the country. And that's to go to everybody in the country. If they won't put you on network television, you can still go out there and do it if you're committed to wanting to do it. So I go out there and I do the pre-interview. And it's the Republican National Convention, 1976, Kansas City. Bob Dole is going to give the keynote address. Now, I had such an angry feeling towards Bob Dole because I got on the show. Okay, I got on the show from the result of the pre-interview, and Shecky Green was the host. You know who Shecky Green is?
No.
Great comedian in Las Vegas. Super guy. One of the nicest guys in the world. And he's very fun. Does 1,000 different dialects. You must get to meet Shecky. He's a great guy. And he was hosting the show. And he asked me if I would, so I get on the show. All right? But it's Monday. But the show, for the first time in the history of The Tonight Show, gets preempted because Bob Dole, instead of giving a 45-minute speech, gives a 2-hour speech, and it goes over and the show's preempted. So I fly back to Detroit, where I'm back there with my wife. And I find out that the show's preempted. And I'm all excited. I'm telling everybody that in the world that I know that I'm on the Tonight Show that night, and it gets preempted. So, it's like one door closes, another door opens. Another door opens. It always works this way. When you're doing what you're supposed to and getting off of. So that was Monday night. Tuesday, Johnny Carson comes in to his meeting with Howard and all of them and says, and they said, we had a guest on last night that was fabulous. They said the audience just went crazy over him. And Carson said, Well, if he was that good, he said, I'd like to have him on before they show that preempted show, which was scheduled for a week from the following Monday. They were going to just set it in there. So I get another call from
Will you fly back?
Will you fly back? This time when I fly back, there's a limo, and I got a first-class ticket. And things have really changed. And I've got my own dressing room. The first time I went in there, it's like, you can dress in the toilet over here. Now I'm in there, and they're pressing my clothes, and they're cutting my hair, which is really like not a big job. They charge for a search fee when they do mine. So I go on the show on Wednesday night. This is like 2 nights later, and I go on with Carson, and Carson says, and we only have maybe 7 or 8 minutes. It was just great. It was super. He was so good to me. And he said to me, this isn't enough time for this. This is really terrific. He said, could you stay over till Friday?
Oh, my gosh.
And do the show again on Friday, because, he checked with Freddie to coordinate. And I said, no, screens. I can't do it. I got to get So I stayed over till Friday, did the show on Friday. The preempted show showed on Monday. And from not having any national exposure at all across the country, I went from just doing AM Columbus and all these shows all over to getting 3 network appearances in 5 days.
Wow.
And the book went from, it was on the bestseller list at that time. Before I hit the Carson show for the first time, I got it on the bestseller list by just going across the country as an unknown. I got on the Tonight Show, did it 3 times in 5 days. The Donahue Show started calling us. I did the Donahue Show 3 or 4 times there, and then the Today Show, and it became it became like the biggest. It became the biggest bestseller of the 70s. It was the top-selling book for the entire decade, and it was all because I was advancing. I was doing what made sense to me. Today I don't do that. Today I don't go out and do it that way. I do it another. I trust it'll all work out in another way.
Well, you've built it also, but I think it's really. I really appreciate you sharing the story, because a lot of times I think people have interpreted your philosophy to mean just let things happen. And the truth is, you're surrendering, but it's faith with work.
As you
faith
think,
with action.
As you think, so shall you be.
Right.
Okay, so you act upon what you think about.
Yes.
If you're thinking about what's missing, if you're thinking about the scarcity in your life, if you're thinking about what's wrong, if you're thinking about what you don't have, if that's where your thoughts are and what you're constantly thinking about and processing your world that way, then that will be what you have to act on. You have to act on what's missing. It's just like in a relationship. If you think about what you don't like about somebody in a relationship, then you have to act upon that.
Yes.
Your relationship is really not located in another person. It's located in you, where everything is located, in that invisible part of you. Do you know what everybody said about the reason why Erroneous Zones was so successful?
No.
It was the 70s. It was the me generation. It was the exact right timing. Dyer was lucky. He hit it at the right. They don't know how many. But that I put 45,000 miles on my car one summer. And that I went out and bought all of those books and all that. It's like
and took the
successful
risk.
people are very, very lucky. Just ask any failure. They'll confirm it for you.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah.
What is the most important? You've shared a couple of lessons, but if you were going to say the most important, say 3 lessons you've got in the last 10 years that you would share with people, what are they?
I know it's at the top, and that is you become what you think about.
Yes.
If you want love in your life, send love out. Have love within you.
Be loving.
Yeah. If it's like I think of the orange, I always give the analogy of if you squeeze an orange, what comes out is what's inside. It doesn't matter who squeezes it or what time of day or what instrument you use or what the circumstances are. You can only get out of an orange what's inside. And if you extend the metaphor to yourself and someone squeezes you, that is, puts pressure on you or says something or whatever, behaves in a way towards you that you find objectionable, and out of you comes anger or hatred or tension or stress or bitterness or any of that, it isn't because of who did the squeezing or the circumstance. It has nothing to do with that, as much as we like to convince ourselves of that.
Yes.
It's because that's what's inside. And what's inside is always within our own control. I think the second thing is that Robert Frost said, we all sit around in a ring and suppose, while the secret sits in the center and knows. And what the secret in the center that knows is what it is that constitutes your very life. It's like this room we're in right now is only a room, not because of the walls and the configuration and all the form that's in here. It's because of this here that neither one of us can get a hold of, this silent, empty, invisible space surrounded by form. That's what, like in Zen they say, it's the space between the bars that holds the tiger. And it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. See, music isn't notes, it's silence between notes. You aren't form. That isn't what makes you who you are. What makes you who you are is the invisibleness surrounded by form. That's the secret that sits in the center and knows. Once you know that and make contact with that, and realize that that is who you are, that it is out of nothingness. It is out of emptiness. It is out of that silent, empty space that you create every thought. Every sound. When you go to make a sound, the sound comes from that nothingness. So nothingness, what we call nothingness, which is everythingness, which is the Tao,
Yes.
and the Tao that can be described is not the Tao. You can't describe it. It just is. It's in every one of us. Once you know that and go there and consult that, then you can not only affect your own physical life, but you can truly affect the physical life outside of you. Deepak and I were having lunch, Deepak Chopra and I were having lunch up in Seattle this day, and we talked about doing this new program. We talked about there are 4 ways we were just toying. We said there are 4 ways to get strawberry ice cream. So let's think of the 4 ways to get strawberry ice cream. And he talks in this very wonderful Indian accent.
Yes.
Indian accent in India. I talk with a funny Detroit accent. And there's a lot more people in India than there are here. So we're talking about what are the 4 ways to get strawberry ice cream, and I said, well, if I want strawberry ice cream, I just have to have a thought, and the thought is I want some strawberry ice cream. Now I'll just go get it. Okay,
Yes.
So I go off to Haagen-Dazs or I go off to the grocery store and I get so that's like a thought, and then you act on the thought. Now there's a second way to get strawberry ice cream, and that is to have a thought and then to send one of your kids to get strawberry ice cream. It's called slavery, okay? It's like, I want some strawberry ice cream, go get it for me. So you have a thought, and then somebody else goes and gets it for you. That's the second way to get strawberry ice cream. Little higher level consciousness. You don't have to work so hard. You've got somebody else doing it for you. There's a third way to get strawberry ice cream. And the third way to get strawberry ice cream is what Deepak offered. He said, you just think, I'd like to have some strawberry ice cream. And then someone walks by and says, excuse me, is this your strawberry ice cream? And you say, wow, yeah. I was just thinking of that. And I was like, everybody listening has had that experience.
Absolutely.
Where you just think of, you think of your sister and you haven't seen her in 7 years, and all of a sudden she's calling you or whatever. And it's like you have affected. You don't think you have. You just think that's some coincidence. But we know that there's no chaos, that there's order in chaos at the subatomic level. We know that. So it's like you think of something and then it just appears for you. And people say, well, if there's 3 ways, what could be the 4th? and we've sitting there and said, well, let's see. I'd like to have some strawberry ice cream. And you manifest it.
Yes.
You just manifest it.
Yes.
Or as Christ said, even the least among you can do all that I have done and even greater things. I mean, the gift of fish and loaves, the gift of feeding others, the gift of and what do you do when you go to sleep and when you're in pure thought? But everything you need for your dream, you manifest. So you need a Lamborghini. You need someone to chase you with a knife. You need a father that's going to abuse you. You need whatever characters you need for your dream, you create it. Now when you wake from your dream, you don't look back at your dream and say, where's my Lamborghini? Because listen, folks, everybody knows it's neurotic to be attached to an illusion.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
I mean, why would anybody be? So all you have to do to learn not to be attached to this illusion is to die while you're alive. That's what the Sufis say. When you die while you're alive, you look back on your life and you realize that you can't own anything. You can't have any of it. Yeah. So what you do is you detach yourself from it, and the more you detach yourself from it, the more you get. And that's the great lesson.
Who is Wayne Dyer? I know he's a spiritual being, but what are your metaphors for yourself? Who are you besides that metaphor? That metaphor is so all-inclusive.
Yeah. My metaphor is that I am not in the world. The world is in me. I really feel that in every cell of my being, the universe exists. So that I can, it's like I'm like a pharmacy. I mean, I can create, what do I need to heal this body, for example, if healing is what I'm talking about. Who Wayne Dyer is this ability to, if I need Valium, to create it. Sure. Deepak tells me the story of when he went to London, and there was a guy next to him drinking, he had 8 drinks before they had gotten halfway there. And finally he said to him, he said, look, he said, you're my buddy. He said, I'm going to buy you a drink. And Deepak said to him, I'm making my own. And it's like that's knowing great. That. Like, yes. I mean, I know that who I am is those birds you hear out here right now. I mean, when I see them flying, I soar with them. That's who I am. I am all of it. I mean, I'm not separate. I'm not even separate from you. Like I said before, it's like I can wiggle this finger because I believe that there's a connection between some kind of a thought which is invisible and the wiggling of this finger. But I can't see that connection. I can't get a hold of that. And if I believe in the oneness of it all, that means that if you can wiggle your finger, that same oneness is there. I've got to detach myself from my separateness and believe that I can't be you. I am it all. I am the sun that comes up in the morning. I am the birds that fly. I am the flower. I am that invisible force that is in every living thing that allows it to be. That's the way I am.
How do you help somebody who sees themselves as separate not only from life but every sense of life? How do you help somebody like that to bridge the gap to where they remember who they really are?
The only way you can do it, I think, and I've been at this business a long time of trying to help people and writing books about it. A lot of books I wrote long before Erroneous Zones that were about counseling, and I was a therapist for years. I think that the notion of that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
So it's like all I can do is help people to get ready. That's all I can do. Yeah. And see, I mean, I picked up the Bhagavad Gita 3 years ago. Okay, now I've had the Bhagavad Gita in my library since I was in college, but I've never read it. And I've seen it on, I've seen it 100 times. Sure. So finally one day I'm here and I pick up the Bhagavad Gita and I read it and I say to myself, it's about time they wrote something like this. This is really terrific. Okay? Then I see that it's about 2,500 years old, or 6,000 years old, or whatever it is. All right, and it's like, but it's been there all along.
Yeah.
But I wasn't ready. But when I'm ready, it's like it soars into my life, and I go to the mailbox, and what I need is ready. And it's like we were talking about earlier, when I need to give a speech, and I need to recite a poem, or even with prosperity, if I'm feeling like I need to have more money or my investments to be. It's like it all gets, the right person shows up and the right thing, it all gets handled. Yeah. It's like trusting your intuition and knowing that everybody has it. So all you can do is help people to get convinced that they have this power within them, that it isn't something I have and you don't. It's something that you have but you haven't used yet. Yeah. And the fact that you haven't used it yet is no reason to judge yourself badly or even to be mad at yourself. You ought to be saying, I haven't been ready. You know, now I am. And as soon as you acknowledge that you're ready, when the student is ready, then you'll find your teachers appearing. And your teacher might be like my little kids who walked into your room. Yes. Or when John asked me, he said, will you do this interview? My first inclination was no. I am here doing something else. I'm here with my family and all of that. And then I got this, I meditated on it, and I got this really nice letter, and it was like, and I thought, I've got to talk to Tony. I've been wanting to talk to Tony. Yeah. And Tony's got something to learn from me, and I've got something to learn from Tony. So the opportunity is here, and we've like missed each other on a lot of occasions. Yes. I mean, we've been with each other, but we've also we've been on the same programs in the same cities where you spoke in the morning and I spoke in the evening, and you've been gone and I've been gone, and we've been sort of like being thrown at each other, but just sort of missing. Yeah. And I said, we both got something to learn from each other, so let's do that. I've heard some things about you from other people that I didn't like. You've probably heard some things about me that I said, the way that you get it all in harmony is that you don't ignore it. You go with each other. So you walk into my house and my children are in love with you in a second. You emit a beautiful kind of spirituality. I see that. Whatever you are going through in your life I know there are struggles with your fame. I mean, you've come very young, very fast, very powerful, and have got an enormous organization about you. And I wanted to say to you, I don't want you to get swallowed up by it. You know, I want the essential beauty that is within you to flower. And sometimes you have to say, I said that's one of the things you got to say is no. And I like to say it, but I'm not as good at it. But I'm a lot better at it than I used to be. So it's like what I'm saying is there's a mutual thing here. There's like
I appreciate the gift, by the way, very much.
Yeah, and likewise, I appreciate the gift of being with you. And so I just let go of all of the other stuff. I said, this is a wonderful opportunity. Let's do it. Yeah. And you know what that came from? That came from nothingness. That didn't come from anybody telling me how to do it or what I should do. That came from
trust.
Came from my own intuition. Trust, surrender. Yeah. But my intuition said, see, I told my wife when I got that, I said, I'm not doing any interviews. I said, I'm not doing this. You know, and she said, you keep saying that. Methinks you protested too much. I said, but I'm not doing any interviews. You know, I'm just. And then she said, read the letter. And I read the letter, and I said, she said, what does your intuition say? What is God telling you? You know, what is God telling you? You know, how may I serve? That's my mantra. How may I serve? How may I serve? How may I serve? Always ask that. Not what's in it for me, but how may I serve? And as I kept saying that, I said, my intuition says, do it. She said, call him and do it. And that,
I have another thanks to make when I go downstairs.
Yeah. But we do that with each other all the
Yeah,
time.
that's
It's
neat.
like that, and that it's like trusting that intuition. You know, it's a very, very powerful thing, and it's like it never ever guides you wrong. The only time in all my investments that I've made since, and I have a whole financial philosophy of giving a certain percentage of it away unconditionally, and also paying yourself first. You know, it's like reinvesting what you make back in yourself and in your family and all that. And the only time I've ever taken a loss financially in any of my investments was when I ignored my intuition once. And I invested in something that was not conducive to the environment. All right? I don't even want to say what it was because it's neither my purpose to plug nor to blame anything else. But my intuition said, no, Wayne, this isn't, they're doing something that is in conflicts with what you believe, but the yields were high. And they were guaranteed, and it was like, and I put $155,000 into this thing, and they went bankrupt, and I lost that $155,000, but I gained so much.
I was going to say, because you never forget those lessons.
Yeah, it was such a great lesson, and since then, every time I invest anything, I always ask, where's this money going? What's it going to be doing? And then it just comes back to me like tenfold. So it's all been made up in many, many ways. So it's like I ignored my intuition once, and I paid a price, but I learned it was a great lesson. It was a terrific lesson.
What's the purpose of life?
Purpose of life is real simple for me. It's Joel Goldsmith has a wonderful book called Parentheses in Eternity. And you are a parenthesis. He says your life is a parenthesis in eternity. It opens at your conception, it closes at your death. But eternity surrounds it. So that there was an instant before you came into form, if you believe in eternity, in which you went from formless to form. The question to ask is not how did I do it? Did I sign up for it? Did God do it? Is it a Big Bang Theory, which is an interesting metaphor?
It's true, isn't it?
or whatever. It's like, don't ask that question, because that's just trying to analyze, that is to break apart something that is not breakable. The Tao is trying to understand the Tao. He said, ask the question, why? Why would you go from formless to form? The answer to that is so simple for me. It's like I used to wonder about that all the time, and now it's like so simple. You can't get anything while you're here in this parentheses. You can't have a thing. You think you can own it, you don't get any of it. If the jewelry that adorns you adorns another in another instant. The house that you own, the cars, all of that kind of stuff. That's just all like a little loan and a little lease, and then it's gone. And if you get attached to it anyway, it'll destroy you. So you can't have anything. So if you can't have anything, if you can't get anything while you're here, then purpose must have something to do with giving rather than getting. And to me, the purpose of life is to give. The purpose of life is to enrich the lives of others in some way. The measure of your life will not be in the duration of your life. It will be measured in the donations of your life, okay? What you are able to give of yourself, because you can't get anything. The only thing you can do with your life is give it away. You can just give it away. Every day your form deteriorates a little more. It's heading towards the closing of parentheses. And once you know that, then you know that you can't have anything. You can't stop that. Nobody can stop that. So all you can do is just keep giving and the more you give away, the more that comes back. What goes around comes around is not just a funny little song title. It is a powerful, powerful message.
And understanding it basically shifts the quality of life.
Well, sure, Tony. It's like getting your life on purpose. If your purpose of life is to give, then get your life on purpose and get everything that you do on purpose. Absolutely. When you do your certification, do it on purpose. Like, how can I improve the quality of... If you're driving a cab, don't be thinking about how much of a fare you're going to get. Think about, how can I serve this person, and let the fare take care of itself. If you're a salesperson and you're thinking about my quotas and what I'm going to get, you're not on purpose. If you're thinking about the quotas of the person you're serving, that person is going to send you 21 names tomorrow of people that they want you to serve as well. It's like the more you give in anything that you do. If you're a dentist, don't think about how much money you can make. Think about making this person's tooth and his mouth as healthy as it can be. The universe will take care of the rest. Purpose means giving, not getting. And once you get that, and it's like that's how you have to orient your whole business. That's how I've oriented my entire business of my books. Do you know that everybody who writes me a letter gets a book?
I have the same practice. I agree with you.
A free book.
It's fantastic.
No charge whatsoever, no expectations, no nothing. And anybody who writes me and says this tape didn't work, they get a free set. You know, it doesn't make any difference. I don't want to hear about it. Somebody wrote me a letter from Seattle, and they came all the way over to hear me at that program that I was on, that I'd mentioned. I was the keynote speaker. I was the last speaker, and they had to go back because their father was sick, and they spent $100, and they couldn't, and they were very upset. I sent her the $100. and the set of the tapes of the whole day. It's like, that's what I believe in doing. Except when people tell me I have to do it.
I was going to say, I think there's one organizing principle for you, and that's freedom.
That's right. It's because a gift is not a gift when it's somebody telling you what to do. Then it's a debt.
When they expect it.
That's a debt. Then. And I don't want any debts.
We live by the same philosophy there. I would agree with you.
So if you demand from me that I give you something or tell me that I have to give it to you, you're not giving me an opportunity to give. You're just giving me a debt. And I've got enough of those.
Yeah. This is wonderful. I really
It's been great. It's been a great interview. Yeah, it's been nice. And it's like, it gives us a connection, you know.
Yeah. What makes Wayne Dyer laugh? I'd be curious, because I know you're easy to smile and laugh, but what gives you the most tickle, the most joy in your life?
I think myself. I think I make myself laugh, and I laugh at myself. I really
What a great skill.
Yeah, I really see the folly of it all. I mean, if you ever listen to me speak in public, most of my laughs are just like poking fun at myself.
Yeah.
If I slur a word or if I say something that isn't, I will make reference to myself. I think great comedians, almost all of them, have an unhostile sense of humor.
I agree with you.
And they can sort of poke fun at you. So I poke fun at not having any hair. I've been using that for a year. You know, I just tell people this is not really a bald head. It's a solar panel for a sex machine. You know, and those kinds of.
That's great.
And also my children really make me laugh. My baby especially. I mean, when they're babies especially, because babies are, I mean, under say 2. You know, they make me laugh. My little boy, I only have one little boy and 6 daughters, and that little guy, it just, last night, I mean, at 11 o'clock at night, we were both laughing so hard in the bed in my little studio. That's where we go down and sleep at night. And just telling stories. I ask him, he always says, tell me a scary story. I said, well, you tell me one. And he just made up the funniest, craziest kinds of things. Children make me laugh. Animals make me laugh. But I really laugh at the folly of it all. I mean, so many people think that we come into this world and we have just this short time and then it's over, and there's no joy, there's no laughter in that. To me, I mean, I'm laughing at the. Someone once said that he said, I don't try to make my audience laugh. He said, I try to make God laugh.
Whoa, that's great.
And I really like that. It's
that's
like,
nice.
It's.
Nice. I think he's laughing all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a wonderful story that Yogananda tells of a black man in the South back in the 40s and 50s when it was really, really terrible down there and he worked in a white church, an all-white Baptist church, where they wouldn't allow, but he was the janitor, and they wouldn't allow any black people to come in and worship. And over he would ask the minister, couldn't I just come in and worship with you on Sunday? That's all I really want to do. And the minister said to him over and over again, I can't let you do that. I would lose my job. I would like to, but I can't. So finally he went and got into deep prayer. And in his deep prayer, he asked Jesus, why Christ? Why can't I just pray with those same people where I work every Sunday? And Jesus responded to him, I've been trying to get into that church for 20 years and they won't even let me in. and it's like it's a metaphor of like, they think that they're praying to me, but I can't even get in. So it's, or Churchill had one of the great lines of all time. We'll talk about humor and great people. He was a man that I really admired. I remember the day he died. I was teaching at a school in Detroit, at Pershing High School in the inner city. And I was trying to give a talk about Churchill, and everybody was talking about the great war hero and about all the prime minister and all that, and I talked about his humor. I did a whole 45-minute talk to my class on humor. I was just 26, 27-year-old kid at the time. And Churchill was in the hospital, and he was prime minister in 1945, and just after the war was over, and he was having such a struggle with Parliament and all that, and he had to go into the hospital for surgery, and a nurse came in, and she had to give him a bedpan because he couldn't get out of bed, and she was carrying out his bedpan, and and he started laughing uproariously, and she said, "What in the world are you laughing about?" And he said, "I was just thinking that that's the first movement of mine that's been carried out since I've been prime minister." And like all of the great ones have that kind of a sense of humor. That makes me laugh.
In those moments.
Yeah, that makes me laugh.
How do you want to be remembered?
I don't care if I am.
Yeah, I had a feeling that would be your response.
I've thought about that, and I just...
Do you want to be remembered by your children?
It doesn't matter. Yeah, I just want to be with them while I'm here and love them and be as loving as I can, and then whatever they do with it will be what they do with it. Whatever. See, I always tell my children that your reputation is not in your hands. Like
Yeah.
you and I both have a very public reputation,
Yeah.
right? But I've heard some wonderful things about you, and I've heard some really scabby things about you, and vice versa, right? But it's not, your reputation is located in all the other people. If you give a talk to 2,000 people, you got 2,000 reputations.
That's true.
And you have no control over it whatsoever.
Yeah.
You go to school, I tell my children, you go to school and there's 30 kids in your class, and you got 30 reputations every day.
Yeah.
And you have the only thing you have control over is your character.
Yeah.
And that is yours. So it's like when you do go out into the world, don't be concerned about how you'll be remembered, because that's just going to be, if there's 10 million people exposed to you, there's going to be 10 million remembrances.
That's true.
Just be concerned about your character. And that's what I try to do. I try to walk the talk.
It's clear you do, and
Yeah.
I think your greatest gift is that you are a character.
Yeah, that's true. I am.
And
Yeah.
I've appreciated this time with you
Thank
very,
you.
very much.
Thank you. God bless you. I
God
appreciate
bless
it.
you.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our interview with Wayne Dyer as much as I did. He's an amazing person and incredibly funny. Guthrie Ranker has now made arrangements for you to be able to get his best-selling take program, Transformation. You'll see it when you believe it. If you'd like to order that program to continue on our discussions, call 1-800-274-4910. That's 1-800-274-4910. I look forward to being with you again. Until then, remember to live with passion.